Hello to all fans of Naruto Lemon. I will post all Naruto Lemon Yaoi, Yuri, or Naruto Lemon stories only on the Boosty channel because Uncle YouTube condemns this. Therefore, I invite everyone who wants Naruto Lemon content to my Boosty channel. Good luck.
お前はどこまで見えている。俺、死に様か。
The oppressive silence was interrupted only by the methodical tapping of fingers on the surface of the tea table and the rustling gait from one side of the IMA to the other, which was accompanied by the creaking of the straw inside the tatami. The girl sitting on the futon and drinking green tea from a chawan did not fit into this atmosphere. The hem of her yukata spread under the table on top of the tatami. Carefully placing the bowl on the table, she got up from behind it and approached the blonde man striding around the room. Reaching out and accidentally touching the man's vest with the sleeve of her yukata, she touched his tense shoulder and, sitting him down on the futon, poured tea onto 3 chawans. Sitting down next to him and looking out from under her snow-white eyelashes, she broke the silence in the room. "It is my duty, father." Having cast a glance at the named man and not noticing no changes in the elder's face, she lowered him back to the tea. "I cannot neglect my direct duties just because of your whim. I will marry Sasori for the well-being of our clans and villages. This is not up for discussion." The melodious voice at the end sounded too firm, it cut through the tense atmosphere, laying on the ears like light silk, but still did not calm the two men. "Do you even understand that you will have to marry a man from another village? Under duress, only because of the whim of the elders, not out of love, but simply because you are obliged by duty and the pure reputation of your clans." The exploded young man after his sister's speech could not calm down and let his not very pure emotions come out. "You should not marry a stranger, Emuto." "You're wrong, brother. His clan has strong blood. Although I became the head of the Uzumaki clan, but by taking the surname of my future husband, I will only acquire a double surname, losing my affiliation with the Namikaze clan. Our future children." Having said children, Naruto chose not to notice how her father choked and his eyes bulged, her brother froze in shock. "Who will be dominated by Uzumaki genetics, will take my surname and join my clan, so my clan will not lose anything, however, as well as his. The marriage issue hasn't been decided yet." Minato muttered, staring at the table through his hands. He glanced at Naruto through his fingers, lowering his hands and approaching his daughter. "Why are you so calm about this state of affairs?" He still couldn't believe that his only daughter was getting married, putting her cup down on the table and squeezing her hands in his. "Have you told your friends?" The mention of friends didn't break the composure on her face. "In the sand, we'll decide everything with the Kazekage. But the outcome is already clear here, the sand won't want to lose the Uzumaki genes. And about friends," turning the chawana over in her hands and putting it back on the table, Naruto looked at the garden, hesitated a little, and answered. "No, I didn't tell them about it, but tonight, the heads of the clans who were invited to the tea party in honor of the meeting should arrive at our house. I think they'll find out everything from them." Looking into the man's soul, she seemed to be saying something that he couldn't yet understand in his daughter's gaze. She had become the head of the clan that they had tried so hard to make her into. They would be proud of her. "But I'll definitely tell them everything in person." "Naruto, it's been a long time since you knew about your marriage, why didn't you tell your friends?" Having run his broken knuckles over his marble cheek, but still not finding an echo of emotion, he tucked a strand of hair from the hairpin behind his ear. "It seems to me that they will be offended that you are hiding such, albeit unofficial, details." Noticing a barely noticeable smile on her face and removing his hand, he gave the floor to his daughter. "My future shouldn't concern them." After taking a few sips from the cup and placing it on the table, she called the servants, who, having taken all the ceramics from the table and placed them on a tray, left the room so as not to disturb their masters. The warm atmosphere flowing through the room, like a quietly rustling summer breeze, brought nostalgic smiles to the lips of people. "When I was sent to train in the clan, I dreamed of becoming the head of Uzumaki and marrying Kakashi and Ai, and now that I have become the head, I am marrying a highly respected shinobi from another village. Quite ironic, isn't it? I don't see anything funny about it. The voice that broke was deep, as if growling, and its owner, shooting a sideways glance over his short-cropped curly hair, frowned and stared at his knees. Depressing memories of the day when the princess of the great clan roughly cut her hair with a kunai began to knock very quietly in his head. The head of the clan, in which girls from the main family are supposed to have long hair, puffed for a long time because of her willfulness. They avoided a public flogging only because she was a princess, but they began to train her more carefully. How could it be for the princess of a highly respected clan to behave so dissolutely? The elders tried for a long time to persuade the head to a more severe punishment, but in the end she also had to pay for in-depth training in the elements. They drove her. Young Uzumaki learned the secrets of tactics and espionage. She was forced to comprehend the secrets of even the minor elements. The girl, the future head of the clan, was taught all the paths that strong people should possess, in the humble opinion of the elders. You can love him. Kakashi, who had previously tried not to interfere in the conversation, could not resist again, giving in to blind faith in the possible happiness of the Amuto. He looked into her azure eyes with a burning gaze. He is quite handsome, not much older than me, is the strongest puppeteer in the history of the Sand Shinobi, the main candidate for the role of the new Kazekage. Listing the first good qualities of the Suna member that came to mind, she suddenly smiled slyly, like a fox that went into oblivion along with his ex-wife. And we crossed paths quite often. It happened that he led a united team. He is a skilled fighter, and I am glad that I have never had to see him in the role of an enemy. He is very strong. Naruto, the father's serious gaze dug into the fragile female figure, trying to find something that he hadn't noticed before. You didn't sleep with him, did you? The question posed didn't bother the girl at all, and only surprised her brother. You know that you have to be pure on your wedding night, right? An absurd tradition. Catching her father's brief glance, she sighed and nodded. I know, father, the seriousness of this event, so be assured of my innocence. A slight smile touched the lips of the young girl, did not disappear even under the embarrassed look of her brother and the guilty and repentant father. They must understand that this marriage will bring much happiness to the peaceful citizens and shinobi of not only their countries, but also the smaller countries that border them. The maids running around the estate, rustling their clothes, did not in the least interfere with the ongoing council of clan heads. What's the topic of today's meeting? Tsunade Senju grumbled, downing a chiwana with rice drink and trying to sit down in a more comfortable position. There was a pile of paperwork in the hospital today. She should be sorting through everything, but here she is, sitting among the eternally gloomy heads of the village clans. You should be patient, Miss Senju. The head of the Hyuga, Hayashi, barked, angry at this disdain in his voice. You weren't the only one who was torn off in the middle of the workday. And anyway, he walked around the room with violet eyes, snorting. What is this boy doing here? He pointed with his hand with a bowl at the young Hatake. Hayashi-sama, during your embassy to the country of stone, Kakashi Hatake came into his legal right to lead the clan, after the previous head had passed away. The head of Uzumaki spoke in defense of her elder brother. Hyuga, looking closely at the adopted son of the Hokage, nodded to himself with satisfaction, and continued drinking tea. So what exactly is the problem that we have gathered here for today? The head of the Nara clan, Shikamaru, croaked in his usual manner, taking over as head of the clan after Shikaku Nara was seriously injured, forcing him to retire from his career as a shinobi. Actually, we are here to discuss the possible departure of the Uzumaki clan from the village of Konohagakure no Sato, namely, the strengthening of the alliance through the political marriage of my daughter, who is also the head of the Uzumaki clan and the heir of Akasuna no Sasori. Having walked with a bored gaze over the assembled people and stopped it on the sharply tense Nara, Minato fell silent. What is the reason for these conditions? Uchiha Fugaku stared at the young head of the Nara clan, pinned to the futon. He did not like this prospect. He planned to recruit Uzumaki into his clan. This proposal came not so much from the sand, but from our elders. Naruto took on the role of the storyteller, seeing that his father and brother would not be able to tell about this, and she also saw the dim light in Shikamaru's eyes. Turning away from the guy, she continued to speak. For a stronger alliance between us and Suna, I will marry Akasuna no Sasori and my clan will move to the territory of the sand. Have you thought about unforeseen events, Naruto-sama? The head of the Aburame, shooting a glance from under his glasses, spoke again in the clan's favorite manner. What about the children who inherited Namake's blood? The probability of this is too small. The genes of Uzumaki and Akasuna, but are stronger. The children who inherit the blood of my clan will be Uzumaki. Why such complications with surnames? The question asked by Akimichi caused a short snort from the Uchiha, made Hyuga nervously twitch his eyebrow and Inuzuka stare at him in surprise. Did I say something wrong? The plump man muttered absent-mindedly, noticing Yamanaka's ironic gaze. Akimichi-sama, coughing into his fist, the head of Sarutobi Ikuzoku, Asuma, put out his cigarette in the ashtray and again turned his attention to the chubby one, answered. Your question sounded a little stupid. Sarutobi croaked nervously, smiling under the gaze of Fugaku and Hayashi. Why exactly did it seem inappropriate to you? The fact that Uzumaki and Akasuna are very strong and powerful clans, and accordingly, they will select children with clan characteristics for their clan. The dog owner literally growled, seemingly obvious things in the fat man's face. So, when is the meeting scheduled where they will officially meet? The clan heads looked at Tsunade in surprise, making it clear that they had forgotten about such a detail as Yuino. Namake's nervously twitched, looked at his daughter and did not notice anything visible on her pale face, only the fire in her eyes of strange origin. Kakashi, unable to hold back his emotions for a second, almost jumped up from his seat, realizing that she would soon leave and turned his silent gaze to his sister. Uzumaki, after a couple of seconds of silence, sipping a couple of small but quick sips from the bowl, looked away at Senju and answered. Tomorrow we leave for Suna. The cup that was resting in the hands of the head of Nara now lay in pieces on the table. The servants who had arrived tried to clean everything up as quickly as possible. Wiping the surface of the tea table dry once more and bowing to the heads of the clans, they left the IMA, closing the shoji behind them. The heads understood that Nara had not lost his temper for no reason. They were all aware of the relations between Uzumaki, Yamanaka, and Nara. They understood why Nara, shooting a glance in the direction of Namake's, seemed to be trying to burn a hole in Uzumaki. Thank you for coming to our home. The meeting is declared closed. After Lord Hokage's words, everyone began to gather. Only Shikamaru Nara sat on his futon and was in no hurry to leave. When everyone left the Hokage's estate, Minato and Kakashi went out, allowing Uzumaki and Nara to talk to each other. The blonde girl, sitting and sipping her tea from the chawan, was not going to start a conversation first. So seeing only dead calm in her, he frowned and decided to ask the question that had been tormenting him all this time. How long have you known about your engagement? Putting down the cup, she looked at him meaningfully, then looked away. About 5 months, looking into the narrow black eyes, at the whitish aristocratic skin, at the calloused hands, she looked away and continued. The elders initially decided that I would be the bride, but they chose the groom carefully and for a very long time. It seems a little more than 3 months. And why didn't you tell us about this? Why didn't you tell us that you would have to marry a stranger? Always calm and slightly melancholic Nara was something ordinary, so when he broke into a dull growl, she only raised her eyebrows in confusion, not expecting such a violent reaction. Nara never allowed himself to yell at her, much less raise his voice at her even half a tone. He was well-mannered and respected his girl as a strong kunoichi. Jumping up and hugging the girl with his arms, pressing her tightly to himself, he whispered hastily, slightly incoherently, but too quietly for it to be possible to make out what the head of the clan was telling her. We love you, but what about Ino? She will not forgive your lies. He said on an exhale, freezing in place. It was immediately clear that he was waiting for her reaction, her answer. I love you too, the girl muttered a little too distantly, gently stroking the man's back. I love you madly, but I have to forget about my feelings and desires for the sake of my village. Lightly pushing him in the shoulders and forcing him to step back a little, she lifted his head and, looking into his eyes, said what he hadn't gotten through to him during the council. I'll give birth to his children, Shikamaru. Today I'm going to Ino. He suddenly exhaled, pulled away, and looked into her eyes, in which deep sadness and immeasurable guilt floated. In front of them, he realized, quite unexpectedly for himself, that the girls were about to have a difficult conversation. You will force yourself to forget about your feelings. The words that suddenly escaped were saturated with disbelief and something else, almost intangible. I completely involuntarily remembered that they call you a genius. Is it justified? I see, it's time for me to return to the clan, Naruto. Akasuna no. Her future surname, he forgot that his friends initially had no chance to be together. They are both Harem and they need heirs. An easy journey to the village of sand. Having bowed, he walked through the corridor, unexpectedly even for himself, and turned towards the girl. I hope he will be a good husband. She walked the head of the Nara clan to the gate and headed towards the Yamanaka clan's territory. She was going to tell Ino everything, explain that the three of them were no longer destined to walk through the central park or weave wreaths for Shikamaru at the 8th training ground. Tomorrow she would set out, and in 3 days she would finally see her fiancé. Naruto's legs were buckling, and his head was filled with possible outcomes of visiting the Yamanaka leader's estate. A herd of goosebumps ran down his spine when muffled sobs reached her ears. The maid mumbled something and went into the next room, leaving Naruto alone. The little Harem alone in front of the room. Her palms were sweaty, and sweat rolled down her forehead to her chin. Touching her wet temples, Naruto wiped her sweaty palms on her clothes and, pushing the shoji aside, entered the room. There were photos scattered everywhere in the curtained room. The blanket was lying in a heap in the corner, and Ino was crying with her nose buried in her palm, holding a crumpled photo in her other hand. Her thoughts were confused and the feeling of guilt grew even stronger, with every sob of the girl sitting on the floor. She wanted to get away from here right now. To go far away and write lines in her defense on her hand, so as not to stand lost in the doorway of the room. Naruto felt unprotected and weak at that moment. Naruto, startled by the girl's quiet whining, she seemed to wake up, throwing off her drowsiness. Walking towards Ino, quietly stepping on the tatami mats, rustling the hem of her kimono, Naruto prepared herself mentally. Prepared for hysteria, screams, anything, just not to hear these quiet sobs. Her head, under her lowered hand, shook. Ino raised her head, looking at her with swollen eyes, her lips trembling, and her light hair stuck to her wet cheeks. Naruto, exhaling, the princess of the clan grabbed Uzumaki's hand, pressing it to her cheeks, whispered. Naruto, tell me it's not true. Tell me that father was delirious just now, please, Naruto. The hoarse voice breaking from the lips of the sobbing girl seemed unnatural. Her voice should be soft and light, not broken and hoarse. Touching her wet cheeks with her hand, stroking them and lifting the girl's head so that she would look at her. So that Naruto could tell the truth, looking into her eyes. Her swollen face and eyes were burning, and her eyes were still a cold turquoise color. Rare sobs broke the silence in the room, and Naruto still couldn't collect the thoughts that were floating in her head. This is true. Approaching the huge gate, the girl still hadn't been able to get a good night's sleep. After yesterday's visit to Ino, when she threw a tantrum and then fell asleep on her lap, she couldn't fall asleep. Ino had to be carried to her bed, and then meet Inoichi and explain why his daughter's room was in disarray. Her head was buzzing and seemed heavier than usual, and her legs felt like cotton wool. Near the guard booth, Naruto saw her father, who was nervously pacing from side to side, scratching the back of his head, Kakashi, who smiled as only he could, with his eyes, only seeing his sister, and Shursui, who, rechecking his equipment, decided not to pay attention to her. There would be time. Shirkuan, so you are one of my escorts? The mischievous lights in the eyes that always danced in them were now hidden in the darkness of Uchiha's eyes. I agree, it sounds bad. Naruto, I only found out yesterday that you were getting married. She had heard that tone before, literally just yesterday, when Kakashi couldn't understand his sister. The Uchiha who had come up grabbed her by the shoulders, not giving her a chance to avoid answering. Why did you follow the elder's lead? Why did you decide to sacrifice everything for this marriage? Blue eyes dug into the guy's forehead, as if trying to find an answer there. Shisui, seeing that Naruto was in no hurry to answer, shook her and began to look into her eyes more insistently. Why? You still ask why? Snorting, the girl twisted out of the guy's arms. Because it is my duty, for the sake of continuing my lineage, for the sake of the prosperity of the Uzumaki clan. I cannot just take and miss the opportunity for a strong union of our villages. We have to go. Walking away from the girl he had been inseparable from since childhood, the one he was taking to a place where she might not return next time. Shisui knew Naruto too well. She wouldn't cry within the village where she had been raised with clan rules, etiquette, and keeping her emotions to herself. Shisui knew Naruto needed to cry. As night approached, Namikaze announced that everyone would be staying overnight. Uchiha went to inspect the area, and Kakashi started a fire. The crackling of the fire in the deep silence of the night sounded like something magical and truly calming, at least that's what Naruto thought. She remembered how on joint missions with Sasori they would sit at night by the fire and talk about their villages, about all sorts of everyday absurdities and funny moments from life. You could remain silent with him. Sasori was strong, she always knew that. He was something of an idol. She admired his strength, his mastery of puppets, his coolness of mind. He often told her about his village. She knew that houses in Suna were made of clay and decorated with stucco. This allowed to maintain the desired temperature in the houses, so even in the summer heat and cold nights the houses were comfortable. Naruto liked to tell him about ceramics. It was boring as Ino said, but ceramics, it's history. The way it was made, it was an art. And she also considered the real art of ninjyo. Traditional dolls that were made only in Suna. Naruto bought several at a time. Only in Suna could they make truly beautiful dolls. Probably one of the reasons why she and Sasori got along right away was their love for ninjyo. Feeling her father's palms on her shoulders, she unexpectedly sobbed, and when her brother sat down next to her, she felt her eyes start to burn. She suddenly realized that she was ready to burst into tears, like Ino had just recently. Feeling Shirsui's gaze on her back, she tensed up. She knew well about Shirsui's impulses to hug, but now she was ready to burst into tears on her father's shoulder. She was the boss, she couldn't. At that moment, when her back was pressed against someone else's stomach, she lost it, tears burned her cheeks, and her throat was squeezed by unbroken sobs and suffocating hysteria. The father's whispered apology became the lever that allowed the hysteria to escape from the throat. The forest was filled not with the sounds of the crackling fire, but with loud sobs and tears that had no right to burn cheeks for a long time. On the border of Suna, where there were still rare trees, the desert wind that walked in these parts embraced them with its hot breath. Shisui began to moan out loud and groan about the fact that Suna was not the village he was eager to appear in. Naruto remembered well that he did not like the desert. It was terribly scorching, empty and quiet, and the approaching storms, whistling to notify travelers about themselves, terrified him. The desert is not a place where you can play, but Naruto with bated breath awaits the moment when she feels the sand scorching the mortars, the endlessly scorching sun and the throat constricted with thirst. To her shame, she had long ago noticed that she liked the land of wind more than her native one. She didn't know for sure if it was because of her element or if her soul simply wasn't drawn to the eternal greenery. The desert, like the mother of these lands that preserves the memory of all times. The mother that protects the village and its inhabitants. Sasori didn't laugh at her then. Ino looked at her in surprise and went back behind the counter. Shikamaru fell asleep without answering, and her father said that her kinship with the element of wind was to blame for everything, muttering curses to the element of wind through his nose as he left. Kakashi had said then that it could be so. Suna, unlike Konoha, was protected by nature itself, but he never said what he thought about it himself. Shisui smiled, hugged her tightly and took her to Kagami's grandfather. She loved Kagami, and also old man Danzo. Danzo often visited Kagami's house. As Shisui said, they were best friends. Because Danzo was the head of Umbuna, she was forbidden to communicate with him. They said that he was a dark person, but she remembers that in childhood he treated her to mochi, quietly stole her from boring training and walked with her along the quiet streets of the village. She loved to listen to stories about his youth, about the missions he carried out, about Lord Second, about the history of the village, and also, having learned about her love for the little Harem, he did not tell anyone about it. He was the one who supported her in difficult times, he was the one who saw her tears. The scorching sand that enveloped her foot brought her out of her memories. Looking back and seeing rare trees somewhere in the distance, she realized that the border of the country of rivers had long been crossed, and the scorching quiet wind that carried the sand had long been hitting her face. Squinting her eyes, breathing in the scorching desert air, scorching her lungs with it, she only now clearly realized that she was now in the country of wind. A long couple of hours of her personal enjoyment of the landscape, accompanied by her brother's quiet snorting and Shirsue's loud indignation, she could immerse herself in this atmosphere with pleasure. This country had always been a mystery to her, and the special atmosphere seemed to transport her to ancient times, when clans fought. And here the playing of the shamisen was still heard along the small streets. The whole group turned towards the source of the sound when they heard a long whistle. Somewhere in the distance, half a day's journey away, sand was flying up, and the wind was picking it up and circling it in a terrible dance. A sandstorm. "We'll have to find shelter," father's voice, hoarse from the long silence, seemed too broken, and the bags under his eyes too dark. "If we go back, we'll see a small cave on the border, we haven't gone far, we'll wait it out and then move on." "No need, Minato-san." Shursui burrowed his head into his backpack and took out a small seal from there, handing it to the village chief. "When we stopped for the night in a small town, Naruchan and I went to the market and bought camel skins. We were told that if we wrap ourselves in them and lie down behind the crest of a dune, we can save ourselves from the singing sands." "Good." Looking at the children in front of him and again turning his gaze towards the storm, he continued. "Well done, we won't have to go back." Sitting in the tent that Shursui remembered a little later, and listening to the storm howling outside, the sand singing their song, Naruto thought that the sand could be compared to lost sunbeams that, looking for a way back to the sky, melted, leaving behind golden grains. And she also remembered how Grandpa Kagami had made up this fairy tale for her and Shursui on the fly when they were 6 years old, right after she returned with her father from Suna. The tent is tightly closed, but sand grains still rush in. Naruto is flooded with old, childhood memories, of quiet evenings in a small house with Shursui, Grandpa Kagami, and Grandpa Danzo. They were her family. For some reason she remembered this not somewhere within her native country, but here, in the country where the sands sing, in the tent outside of which the wind dances, catching golden grains of melted rays of the sun. Kakashi is lying next to her, quietly muttering something in his sleep. Her father, sprawled on his side next to her, is reading something from a scroll and making notes. Shursui, pressing her back to himself, is rummaging through her hair, and all she can do is sit and enjoy this moment, press closer to Shursui, listen to the creaking of the pen and the quiet muttering. As the huge sand wall becomes visible in the distance, Shursui exhales, Kakashi grips the strap of his backpack tighter in his hand, and Minato tells everyone to speed up a little. The sun is scorching and their heads are boiling with fatigue, their eyes are swimming and their legs are giving out. They are waiting for the moment when they can collapse on their bed in the rented room of the local motel. The shadow in the opening of the large wall becomes salvation, and the shinobi leading them quietly and without unnecessary conversations is a joy. The sun is already setting towards the horizon and shadows are playing in the village, melodies performed by street musicians are spreading through the streets, and between the houses, closer to the central square, the conversations of citizens can still be heard. 3 days of walking had taken its toll, so as they passed the main square, Naruto felt her legs buckle slightly from fatigue. The shinobi who had accompanied them to the residence was talking to Minato about something, and Kakashi and Shursui were quietly talking about something, looking at the houses in Suna. Looking around the streets she had long ago learned, she saw a group of children in the shadow of a house, who were walking towards a boy who was huddled against that very wall. Looking again at those walking in front, she turned off the main road and walked towards the children. The sobs that reached his ears brought fresh fragments of memory. Instead of the small and fair-haired Harem, Naruto sees only a small boy, not even a genin yet. Pale, dark-haired, and very tired. The worn and old plush in the child's hand was squeezed and pressed even tighter to the child's chest. The group of children walking towards him were quietly talking about something, throwing rare glances at the brunette. The disappearing shadow and a short ray of sunlight blinded Naruto for a second. And in the sunlight she saw deep red hair. Fragments of memories with her mother flashed through her head. Just as red-haired. And just as crying during their last meeting. Something sank in her stomach, and a thick lump formed in her throat. Neither forward nor backward. Unconsciously, not at all on purpose, Naruto draws more and more parallels between his long-dead mother and this little boy. Just as red-haired and sad. When the girl kicked the dust and pebbles lying on the ground at the boy, the lump in her throat dissolved and her stomach no longer twisted. That weakness in her body was gone, and Naruto thought that this child was not loved here, just as her mother was not loved. Naruto was thinking too much today, and the veil was increasingly clouding his eyes and preventing him from thinking clearly. Stepping aside the children and running chakra through the channels, Naruto hoped that she would not kill these children. And she also wanted to make sure that this boy was not at all like her mother. What's going on here? The voice seemed to sound rougher than she had intended. The children, who had turned around abruptly and fallen a few times in surprise, were trembling at the tone of the girl in front of them. Shinobi. The boy, apparently the eldest, standing in front of his friends, looked the girl over and, having noticed the forehead protector of another village, swallowed nervously, glanced behind him, straightened up, and looked the shinobi in the eyes. Shinobi-san, we wanted to teach Gaara a lesson so that he would not come to this playground anymore. The child's voice trembled, his knees shook. The children probably did not expect to meet a foreign shinobi. And Naruto, looking at the children in surprise, could not understand how a 5-6-year-old boy was bothering them. Naruto suddenly realized that the upbringing here was different. The boy didn't lie, he protected his friends, and while trying not to show his fear, he still spoke to her respectfully. How is he bothering you? Sincere curiosity, which is so unusual for her, prevailed over the voice of reason. She understood that they were teasing the boy, but still, for some reason, she wanted to hear what they would say in their defense. He's a demon. Looking again at the red-haired boy, huddled in a small ball, she can't understand where they saw a demon in this little boy. The demon was in her village, he was huge, beautiful, and terribly evil. There was a huge fox with 9 tails, which her mother restrained, because of which she died. But where do you see a demon in this little boy? The boy who was talking to her looked at the child huddled against the wall in confusion and began to examine him carefully. The children looked at each other and then stared in bewilderment at the woman, or rather not even a woman, towering over them. She was young, but clearly very strong. His eyes are bottomless, without pupils, and his eyelids are black. This is not normal. Stopping looking at the child, he again looked at the girl in front of him with confidence in his eyes. The confidence with which the child spoke made her laugh. And my cheeks are striped. For clarity, she ran her hand over her cheeks, outlining the stripes with her fingers. The attention of the children, who had been looking at her before, was now completely stolen. Her face had never been looked at so closely. Our parents told us that he was a demon. The boy, who seemed to have lost all his confidence, glanced sideways at the red-haired child. And if your parents tell you to throw yourself at a kunai, will you? Naruto never thought that children could be so stubborn. When will this kid get tired of repeating, he's a demon? But he's a demon. Unable to contain a short snort at this answer, Naruto glanced at the children again. Again, 25. This is already somewhat annoying her, but he's a child. He just needs to be explained that it's not so, and not hit. The only demon here is the one who, while mocking another, does not try to put himself in his place. Having heard the foreigner's answer, the children bowed briefly and apologized to the boy. And left. The children's backs, hidden behind the house, still twinkled in the girl's eyes. Looking at the child, Naruto decided that it was time to talk to him. Coming a little closer and dropping to all fours in front of him, Naruto sees that he is barely shaking. He is no longer crying or sobbing, he is simply beginning to feel the approaching night chill. The sleepy and sluggish child seemed to blend in with the atmosphere of this village. It was as if he was one with the local sands and the particularly scorching sun. A sneeze from the child's mouth brought Naruto out of his thoughts. It drove away the approaching memories from his distant childhood. She suddenly wanted to stroke him, hug him tightly, and say that everything would be fine. Touching his trembling crown with her hand, gently running it through his rich red hair, Naruto herself, without knowing why, sobbed. Dryly and briefly, but attracting the child's attention. The boy did not stop pressing his whole body against the wall. He sneezed dryly and wiped his nose with the back of his hand, raised his head and looked at the girl who was squatting in front of him and gently stroking his head. The girl who had protected him, and now stroking him, was sniffling from suppressed tears. Unable to hold back a ragged groan, he clung to the blonde and, squeezing her tightly in his arms, began to cry. Hugging the small, trembling body, she took him in her arms and went with him to the residence. Gaara, pressing himself even closer to her, buried his nose in her neck and squeezing her vest in his hands, began to calm down. "Where do you live, Gaara?" The child, who was already quietly snoring in her arms, twitched in her arms, trying to get comfortable and froze from the girl's unexpected words. "You have very beautiful hair. It reminds me of my mother." The boy in her sleeve started, his eyes wide with amazement, and stared at her chin. It was the first time he had been told that his hair was beautiful. And no one had ever compared him to someone as close as his mother. More often they had shouted that this hair was soaked with blood. Tears suddenly welled up in his eyes, and the boy himself, realizing that she was from another village, wanted her to live here, in Suna. "I don't want to go home," a quiet, hoarse voice made Naruto a little tense. She doesn't know how long he cried before she appeared, but she hugs the child trustingly pressed to her tighter and doesn't want to think about the bad. "My brother and sister are there. They are afraid of me. Take me to Dad, to the residence." Looking into his bright, bottomless eyes, she seemed to see herself, just as small, helpless, sad, and tired of life. "Okay, my name is Naruto." A soft smile flashed across her face, as unexpectedly as the bright flash of sunlight that blinds you in the morning when the curtains are pulled back. "And me, Gaara." The child, who pressed himself even tighter into her chest, without realizing it, became the reason why she put all her doubts aside. She would stay, if not for the village and the clan, then definitely for the little boy who reminded her so much of her mother. Entering the office, she had to meet the Kazekage's scrutinizing gaze. Only now did she realize that she had disappeared for an hour, without letting anyone know where to look for her. Looking at her father, she saw barely noticeable discontent and all-consuming fatigue. "I apologize for being late." Pressing the child a little tighter to herself under the long-lasting gaze of the Kage of this village, she looked away to the red crown of the head, which, quietly snoring, pressed itself against her in sleep. "When I was walking with everyone to your residence, I saw a crowd of children on another street. I could not pass by this child." Looking at the frowning father, she squeezed the prickly fabric tighter under her fingers, watching the change of emotions on his face. He asked to take him to his father's residence, looking at the tall brunette in a black turtleneck, whose hair was dark, shimmering with a dark red color. "Is he your son, Kazekage-sama?" "Yes, thank you, Naruto-san, for helping my son and bringing him here." Getting up from the table and walking past her father, she caught herself thinking that he was much taller than him, at least 6 or 8 centimeters. Carefully taking his son from the hands of the young kunoichi, he, having picked him up more comfortably, walked to his table, sitting down at a chair and placing the child on his lap. "Kazekage-san, I think we should rest, and then we can go to the meeting." The gloomy blonde man, who put the papers aside, approached the door. He was very tired, and the disappearance of his daughter had exhausted him even more. "Yes, of course. You should rest, and then, tomorrow, you will meet Sasori." When Minato left, and the others followed him. Raza said one last thing to Naruto. He seems to like you, Naruto-san. Slightly lifting the corners of his lips, he stroked his son's back. You can come to us tomorrow after visiting Akasunano. Gaara will be glad to see you. Of course, Kazekage-sama. I will be happy to visit Gaara-kun. Taking one last look at the peacefully sitting father and son, she exhaled and left. Raza, who had seemed so callous to her before, now literally melted at the sight of his son. His gentle touches, and the slight movement of his hands that tangled the child's hair on his head, brought a smile to her face. Her father had never hugged her like that. The room was in semi-darkness, and the round hole in the wall that served as a window was covered only by a thick piece of fabric, suspended on a fixed fishing line. The room was practically empty, having only a door that most likely led to the bathroom, a nightstand, and a bed. Putting her backpack next to the bed, Naruto took off her shoes and collapsed on the bed, fully clothed. She was very tired, her legs were weak, they practically couldn't hold her up, her arms were shaking from overexertion, her stomach was pulling down from the lack of normal food, and her head was buzzing at the same time, forcing her eyelids to stick together. A few seconds later, as it seemed to the girl, opening her eyes, she saw pitch darkness and a bright disk of the moon. She herself did not notice how she slept until late at night. The lower abdomen was pulled even more than it was during the day, the body was even more tired and painful. Naruto decided that the bathroom was the best idea now, and then sleep would come. Getting out of bed, her vision swam and everything turned black. After sitting for a while and waiting for her head to stop buzzing and her eyes to regain their previous colors, she stood up and leaned on the nightstand because of her legs, which were too tense. Having gotten used to the sensations, she went to the bathroom, opening the door and turning on the light. The room was filled with dim light. She walked to the tap and turned on the water, slowly began to pull off her vest. Taking off the turtleneck was harder than expected, but when it fell under her feet along with the bandages that had previously been tied around her chest, a view of reddened, irritated skin where it had been pulled tight before was revealed. The skin, to which a layer of sand had stuck, itched. She wanted to scratch it, to tear it off. Instead, she takes off her bag with weapons, pulls the bandage off her leg and takes off her pants. Standing naked, covered from below only by underwear, she again feels like not just the head of the clan and a girl. Looking at the sand clinging to her skin, at the nasty abrasions from the bandage, she feels like a shinobi. The water in the bathtub had almost filled up in the time it had taken her to sink into herself. She tried to shake off the sand, climbed into the bathtub, lay down, and finally relaxed for the first time in 4 days. The hot, almost scalding water enveloped her, making her abrasions itch painfully, and the sand, which had previously stuck so unpleasantly to her skin, fell away under the crushing wave. Closing her eyes, she remembered her trips to the hot spring at the edge of the village. It was very small compared to other springs in Tanzaku, but after the mission, where upon arrival you begin to feel how your limbs hum and sweat soaks through all your clothes, it becomes salvation. The memories in her head were replacing each other too quickly and unexpectedly, when the thought did not even have time to fully form. Opening her eyes and looking at the moon, which was visible from the hole in the wall of the room, she again floated through the memories of childhood. Long ago, when Kagami's grandfather was still a shinobi, he loved to tell Naruto and Shursui about the girl who became a goddess. Kagami generally loved to tell different stories, legends, and fairy tales of his own composition, but for some reason he rarely spoke about this girl. She was beautiful. But having desired peace for her lands, having bitten the forbidden fruit, she became mired in human sins, and her own sons sealed her in the moon. Then Naruto thought for a long time that the moon was threateningly hanging over their world, preparing to fall to the ground at the most unexpected moment. Now, looking at this eternal satellite of the earth, she understands that she no longer sees anything threatening in it. A gust of cold air sobered her up and she noticed that the water was no longer scalding hot, but barely warm, and climbed out of the bath. Taking out the plug and wrapping herself in a towel, she looks at her legs. For some reason it seems to her that they are crooked, wrong, and ugly. Putting the towel on a hook, she goes to the nightstand and takes out a robe from there. Naruto doesn't have enough strength now to climb into his backpack and look for something there to change into. Her body was soft after the bath and now she just wanted to sleep. Tying the belt around her waist and throwing back the blanket, she finally lies down and, wrapping herself in a cold blanket, falls asleep. The tatami creaks underfoot, and the silk fabric of the kimono cools her hot hands. Her head is filled with thoughts, buzzing, and for some reason Chiyasama keeps looking into her eyes. The chiwana in her hands seems like a burning piece of stone, and the unusually quiet Sasori seems terribly cold. He stealthily glances at Minato. Naruto herself feels superfluous. Minato, talking about something with the maid, looks too relaxed when a heavy aura from a seemingly decrepit old woman spreads in the room. Naruto shrugs uncertainly. After all, this meeting is only a formality, but the old woman is too unpredictable. Father and Chiyasama have already discussed everything, set dates, they exchanged gifts, but this old woman will not calm down. They have been sitting here for more than 3 hours, and she still sits and does not let them go. Chiyasama, having finished saying something to the maid, Minato noticed the tense atmosphere and decided to take the conversation into his own hands. I take it we're done? The old woman sitting opposite didn't even bat an eye at Namikaze, continuing to stare at the girl. I suggest Naruto-san stay so that she can meet my grandson and settle in this village. Ignoring the surprised faces of the blondes, she got up from the table and went to the door. With a slow, somewhat crooked gait, she reached the maid who was standing near the door, whispering something to her and waiting for a nod. She turned around and looking at the guests, hissed under her breath. Go to the Kazekage and discuss this matter. The slam of the door brought Naruto out of his trance, and she looked at her father and saw veins appearing on his face. Sasori was still sitting in his place and was already looking at Naruto. Realizing that he was already more relaxed, she got up from the table and left. Closing the door and leaning her back against it, Naruto was finally able to breathe out calmly. All that time she spent communicating with the elder, the irritated father, and the too distant Sasori. Her ribs felt like they were being pulled in by a corset. It was hard to breathe, and her thoughts were not getting in order under the old woman's watchful gaze. Looking around the corridor shrouded in semi-darkness, she went to the exit leading to the street. Her father would find her himself, and she really wanted to meet Gaara. Walking with the shinobi assigned to them to the Kazekage's house, Naruto looked at the evening village, almost immersed in the embrace of night. It played with new colors. The melodies that played in the morning along the streets now seemed to flow in their own current under the ringing of bells. The shinobi who stopped in front of her shook her shoulder and said something to her. Naruto felt like he had water in his ears. She couldn't hear, and now she wasn't here, but somewhere, or more accurately, a long time ago. A cold wind hit her in the back and sobered her up. Looking at the worried Shoji-san, the shinobi who had already started to get nervous because of the girl's lack of reaction. Naruto-san, touching the girl's shoulder again and finally noticing the reaction to his actions, he exhaled and was able to calm down a little. Are you feeling unwell? No, answering Shoji and turning his attention to the houses surrounding them, Naruto thought that she vaguely remembered this place. Perhaps she had passed here once. Everything is fine. Did you say something? Seeing the surprised look of the shinobi directed at her, Naruto gave herself a mental slap on the back of the head. He frowned slightly and scratched his cheek, pointing to the house in front of which they stopped. Naruto-san, I said that we arrived at the Kazekage-sama's house. Thank you, Shoji-san, for seeing me off. After bowing and waiting for someone to bow back, Naruto straightened up, waving his hand at his escort. Naruto walked to the front door and knocked, waiting for the door to be opened for her. Voices were heard in the house, and the next moment a boy opened the door for her, frozen in front of her. Looking at the girl in front of him, the boy stepped back, feverishly running his eyes over her, and shouted. Father, a girl has probably come to see you. Moving closer to the door, the boy let his father, Lord Kazekage, go ahead. Hello, Naruto-san. Letting the girl into the house, Raza leaned over to his son and sent him to call his brother to the kitchen. Hello, Raza-sama. When the sound of feet was heard in the corridor, and Gaara had already flown out from around the corner, Naruto smiled, sat down, spreading her arms to the sides. The boy sobbed, smiled, and threw himself into the girl's arms. Burying his nose in the soft collar of the vest, feeling how the girl's arms closed behind his back and pressed him even closer to her. And the words scorching his mind, causing tears in his eyes and a wide smile on his face, settled in his head, threatening not to evaporate from there. "I'm staying here, Gaara." The scar on his forehead was scorched by a hot breath, and then by a gentle touch of lips on the rough skin of his forehead. Gaara quite accidentally thought that this is how his mother would hug him. Chapter 4, Meeting the Past. Naruto woke up early in the morning, feeling the first rays of the sun gently touch her face, driving away the remnants of the night's cold. The room was dimly lit, and she allowed herself to bask in the bed for a few minutes, not rushing to leave the cozy place. The memories of the events of the previous night were still before her eyes, filling her heart with mixed feelings. The quiet rustle of the wind outside the window reminded her of the sandstorms that so often raged in these parts. Getting out of bed, Naruto pulled on a light robe and headed to the window. The wind carried the scent of the desert, which awakened a strange feeling of nostalgia in her heart. It was so long ago. She thought, remembering her childhood spent in Konoha and the people who were once a part of her life. But today required concentration. Ahead of her was a meeting with Sasori, and Naruto knew that this would not be just a formal meeting. Something important was about to happen, and it bothered her more than she could admit to herself. She stepped out onto the terrace, where the fresh morning breeze immediately touched her face, reminding her of the cold she had just left behind the window. Naruto loved the morning hours for their calm and the opportunity to gather her thoughts. The landscape around her seemed both harsh and beautiful. The lifeless desert stretching to the horizon gave her a strange feeling of inner harmony, as if she herself were a part of this silent world. As she enjoyed the cool morning air, thoughts of meeting Sasori came back to her mind. Their union, planned by the elders, was meant to strengthen the bond between the two villages, but Naruto felt that there was more to it. Something about Sasori's past made her uneasy. She remembered the rare times they had crossed paths on missions, and how he always kept a low profile, never revealing his true thoughts. The man was a mystery to her, one that she would soon have to solve. Naruto returned to her room and began preparing for the day ahead. Her thoughts were consumed not only by the upcoming meeting, but also by memories of the past. The shadows of these memories haunted her, forcing her to return again and again to things that had long been forgotten. She could not shake the feeling that her past was somehow connected to what was about to happen today. Her mother, Kushina, often told her stories of old times, of wars and peaces between villages. One such story concerned Suna, the village where Naruto would spend her immediate future. Those stories mentioned legendary shinobi who could change the course of history with their strength and skill. Naruto had always admired such stories, but now she felt like she was becoming part of such a legend, and it filled her with both pride and fear. Once Naruto had dressed, donning the traditional attire appropriate for formal occasions, she left the room and headed for the exit. She had a long day ahead of her, and she knew she had to be prepared for anything. As she walked down the narrow hallways of the residence, she felt the tension building within her. Every move she made seemed measured and controlled, as if she were walking through a minefield where any wrong move could lead to disaster. As Naruto walked outside, she found Shisui, who seemed to be waiting for her at the exit. His expression was serious, but there was a slight worry in his eyes. He walked up to her and, without saying a word, looked her over carefully. Naruto saw something more than just concern for her safety in his gaze. "Naruto," he began quietly, coming closer, "are you sure you're ready for this? Today could change a lot. Not just for you, but for all of Konoha." His words sounded like a warning, and Naruto felt her heart tighten with excitement. She knew exactly what Shisui meant. Meeting Sasori was not just a political formality. There was much more to it than what was obvious on the surface. "I know, Shisui," Naruto replied, looking him straight in the eye. "I feel like something needs to happen. But I have to do it. For the village, for the clan, and for myself." Shisui paused for a moment, as if considering her words, and then nodded in agreement. A shadow of regret flashed in his eyes, but he quickly pulled himself together and returned to his usual cool expression. "If you need anything, Naruto," he said, "you know where to find me." She nodded in response, and they headed to the meeting place. Naruto was seething with tension inside, but she tried to keep herself under control. Everything she did was for the good of her village and clan, and she couldn't afford to be weak at a time like this. The road to the Kazekage's residence seemed endless. The streets of Suna were deserted, only occasionally did you see locals hurrying about their business. Naruto noticed how they cast quick glances at her and Shisui, full of curiosity and distrust. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, like before a storm. When they reached the residence, Naruto paused for a moment in front of the massive doors leading inside. Shisui gently tapped her shoulder, reminding her that it was time to go. She nodded at him and, gathering her courage, walked inside. The room where the meeting was to take place was spacious and bright, with high ceilings and large windows that let in the sunlight. In the center of the room stood a long table, at which the Kazekage was already seated. Next to him stood Sasori. His figure, as always, seemed motionless and cold, as if carved from stone. His eyes were as mysterious as always, but today Naruto noticed something new in them: interest, or perhaps tense anticipation. The Kazekage stood up, greeting Naruto and Shisui. His gaze was firm, as befitted the leader of the village, but there was no hostility in it. He motioned for Naruto to sit, and she did so, trying to remain calm. Shisui remained standing behind her, ready to intervene at any moment if the situation got out of hand. "Naruto-san," the Kazekage began, "I am glad you have found the time for this meeting. We are here to discuss the details of your alliance with Sasori. This is an important step for both our villages, and I am sure you understand the gravity of this event." Naruto nodded, listening carefully to his words. She knew that she couldn't afford to miss a single detail. Every answer, every word she said, could affect the future of not only herself, but all of Konoha. "I understand, Kazekage-sama," she replied, trying to sound confident. "I am ready for this step and I understand its importance. My clan and village support me in this decision." The Kazekage nodded in approval, but before he could say anything, Sasori took a step forward, drawing attention to himself. His gaze was directed straight at Naruto, and she felt her heart skip a beat. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, but there was a certain strength to it. "Naruto-san," Sasori began, "are you sure you're ready for this alliance? Your decision shouldn't be hasty. I respect your courage, but I want to make sure you understand what you're getting into." The words sounded like a challenge, and Naruto felt something boiling inside her. She couldn't afford to show weakness in front of him, but there was something in his voice that made her think. He didn't sound like an enemy, not like an ally, but like someone who genuinely wanted to understand her. "I am ready," she answered firmly, looking him straight in the eyes. "I have no doubt in my decision. We both know that this union is important for our villages. I will do everything in my power to make it a success." Sasori's gaze lingered on her face for a moment, as if trying to find something more in her words. Then he nodded slowly, agreeing with her words. "In that case," the Kazekage said, breaking the tension, "we can move on to discussing the details. Naruto-san, you will need time to get used to our village, and I trust that Sasori will be your guide and protector in that. Your presence here is important to us." Naruto nodded again, accepting the Kazekage's words. She knew that her life would change now, and that there would be difficult trials ahead. But she was ready to face them with dignity and courage. As the meeting came to an end, Naruto stood up, feeling the tension building up in her body slowly begin to release. The Kazekage bid her farewell, reminding her to meet again the next day, and Naruto headed towards the exit. Sasori remained standing in his place, not taking his eyes off her. There was still something in his eyes that she couldn't quite place, but that didn't matter right now. Shisui was waiting for her at the exit, and as they left the residence, Naruto felt a slight dizziness creeping up on her. She paused for a moment to compose herself, and Shisui immediately noticed her state. Is everything okay? He asked, leaning slightly toward her. Yes, Naruto replied, trying to smile. I just need to rest for a bit. Shursui nodded, offering her his hand to support her. Naruto accepted his help and, leaning on him, they slowly made their way back to her temporary home. As Naruto walked back, she couldn't help but think about Sasori and the strange aura that surrounded him. She felt like he wasn't just a shinobi on a mission. There was something personal in his actions, something that concerned not only their upcoming alliance, but her as well. When they returned to the residence, Naruto thanked Shursui for his support and went to her room. She knew she needed to rest for the next day, but thoughts of the past and future were haunting her. Her heart was full of doubts, but she knew she couldn't afford to be weak. Naruto lay down on her bed, closing her eyes and trying to find peace in the quiet of the night. There were new challenges ahead of her, and she had to be prepared for anything. But deep down, she knew that she wouldn't be able to find peace until she dealt with what was troubling her. The shadows of her past continued to follow her, and she knew that sooner or later she would have to face them. Chapter 5, Web of Intrigue. The Kazekage's office was spacious and reserved, as befitted the leader of a village that had existed for centuries in the heart of a merciless desert. The walls were decorated with simple scrolls of calligraphy that reflected the wisdom of generations, and a pair of ancient maps of Suna that marked important points of strategic importance. The air was heavy with heat, even at this early hour. The Kazekage stood by the window, looking out over the endless sand dunes. Sasori hung back like a shadow, observing the proceedings with his usual detachment. Naruto stepped inside, feeling her heart begin to beat faster. This meeting meant more than just a formal discussion of the terms of the marriage. Here, in this office, her fate and the fate of entire clans, whose reputation and influence depended on how successful this union was, would be decided. The Kazekage turned to face her, his gaze stern and focused. There was weariness in his features, hidden behind a mask of calm. This man had been hardened not only by time, but also by the difficult decisions he had made throughout his reign. Now he was preparing to make another one. Naruto-san, he began, his voice deep and confident, like one accustomed to power, I am glad you have come. We have important matters to discuss concerning your marriage to Sasori. This union is not just a formality. It symbolizes the unification of two great villages, and our future depends on how well you both can handle your roles. Naruto nodded, trying to hide the worry that was surging through her. Conflicting feelings warred within her, duty to the village and fear of the unknown. Sasori remained silent, his presence in the room felt like something ominous, hidden in the shadows. She knew he was strong and intelligent, but there was something hidden behind his cool demeanor that she couldn't quite place. The Kazekage slowly walked up to the table and sat down, motioning for Naruto to take the seat across from him. She sat down, feeling the skin of her palms begin to sweat from the strain. She was about to hear suggestions and make decisions that could change her life forever. We all understand that times have changed, the Kazekage continued, his gaze fixed on Naruto. A village's strength is no longer determined solely by its shinobi numbers or strategic location. Allies are important, political connections are important. This marriage is our chance to strengthen the relationship between Suna and Konoha, and I hope you understand the responsibility that rests on your shoulders. Naruto nodded again, trying not to take her eyes off the Kazekage. She understood the importance of what he was saying, but her thoughts kept returning to Sasori. This man who was supposed to be her husband was a mystery to her. His cold detachment would have scared anyone, but Naruto felt that there was more behind that mask. The Kazekage, noticing her tension, softened his tone slightly. Naruto-san, I understand that this is not easy for you, he said, but you must trust the process. Sasori is one of our finest shinobi. He is a strong warrior, a clever strategist, and, most importantly, devoted to his village. I am confident that you will be able to find common ground and make this alliance a success. At that moment, Sasori, who had been standing to the side until now, took a step forward. His movements were smooth and almost imperceptible, like a predator stalking its prey. He looked at Naruto, and in his gaze she caught the very determination that the Kazekage had spoken of. But there was something more in that gaze, something that made her heart skip a beat with an incomprehensible thrill. "Naruto-san," he began, his voice even and calm, but with an underlying threat, "I understand that this may all seem unfamiliar to you. But I want you to know that I respect your courage. Not everyone is capable of taking on the kind of responsibility you do." Naruto felt Sasori's words seeping into her mind, making her wonder what was really behind his words. He was calm and composed, but there was a certain urgency to his words that made her feel uneasy. "I am grateful for your words," she replied, trying to maintain her composure. "I understand how important this is, and I am prepared to accept my role. But I would like to get to know you better, Sasori-san. After all, we must work together for the sake of our villages." Sasori nodded slightly, agreeing with her words. A shadow of approval flashed in his eyes, but it disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. "Of course, Naruto-san," he replied. "I am ready to answer any questions you may have. But know one thing, I always put the interests of the village above my own. If we are going to work together, we must remember that." The Kazekage watched their exchange closely, his face showing nothing but professional interest. He was the leader, and his job was to make this alliance a success. But even he could not predict where this game would lead, where every word and action could be decisive. "I have no doubt that you both can handle this task," the Kazekage said, his voice firm and determined. "But I would like to hear your thoughts, Naruto-san. What do you think of this marriage and the role you will be playing?" Naruto felt all eyes in the room focus on her. This was an important moment, and she knew that her words could determine the future of their alliance. Her thoughts were torn between duty and personal feelings, but she knew that now was the time to speak directly and honestly. "I understand the importance of this union," she began, trying to sound confident. "I know that this marriage is not just a formality, but a strategically important decision for both of our villages. I am ready to take on this responsibility and do everything possible to make our union successful. But I also believe that for this to happen, we need to get to know each other better and work together. I am ready for this and hope for mutual understanding." The Kazekage listened to her attentively, his face remained impassive, but approval flashed in his eyes. He understood that before him stood not just a young kunoichi, but also the leader of his clan, ready to take responsibility for the future. "Those are wise words, Naruto-san," he said, his voice softening. "I am glad you understand how important this is. I am confident that you and Sasori will be able to forge a strong relationship that will serve as the foundation for a long and fruitful alliance between our villages." Sasori, who had been standing to the side the entire time, looked at Naruto again. His face remained expressionless, but there was a slight glint in his eyes, as if he was satisfied with her answer. "In that case," the Kazekage continued, "I suggest you, Naruto-san, spend some time in Suna. It will help you better understand our village, our people, and of course, your future husband. I am sure it will be beneficial to your union." Naruto nodded, accepting his offer. She knew that this wasn't just a formality, but a real opportunity to get to know the village that would soon become her new home. Her future was tied to Sasori and Suna, and she had to be ready for it. "I agree," she replied. "I want to get to know your village and its traditions better. It's important for me to understand how I can be useful in our union." The Kazekage smiled, for the first time since they had met. It was a small smile, almost unnoticeable, but it showed that he was pleased with her determination. "Great," he said. "Sasori will take you around the village and show you everything you need to know. I'm sure you'll get answers to all your questions." Sasori nodded again, agreeing with the proposal. Naruto noticed how he was watching her every move carefully, as if gauging her reaction to what she had said. She felt that their relationship would be complicated, but she was prepared for it. After all, not only her future depended on it, but the future of all of Konoha. When the meeting was over, the Kazekage walked them to the door, reminding them to be careful and consider all possible risks. Naruto realized that there was more to his words. Perhaps a warning that she was about to encounter something she didn't yet know about. Once outside, Naruto felt the hot Suna sun instantly burn her skin. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her heart, which was still beating fast from the intense conversation. Sasori, who was walking next to her, was silent, his gaze directed forward, as if he was lost in his own thoughts. "Naruto-san," he suddenly spoke, breaking the silence, "if you have any questions or concerns, it would be best to discuss them now. We have a lot to do, and I don't want there to be any misunderstandings between us." His voice was still calm, but there was a hidden firmness in it. Naruto understood that this man was not used to compromise, and expected the same determination from her that he himself demonstrated. "I have questions," she replied, looking at him. "But I think it's better for us to discuss them when we're alone." Sasori raised an eyebrow slightly, but nodded, agreeing with her words. They headed deeper into the village, where the streets were narrower and the shadows of the buildings longer. Naruto could feel everyone's attention focusing on them, and it was a little unnerving. But she tried not to show it. Their walk through the village took several hours. Sasori showed her the main sights, told her about the traditions and customs of Suna. His speech was laconic, but meaningful, and Naruto caught herself thinking that his voice calmed her down, despite all the tension of their situation. When they reached a small square surrounded by old houses, Sasori suggested that they take a break. They sat down on one of the stone benches, and Naruto felt the fatigue creeping up on her. Everything that had happened over the past few days was starting to take its toll on her, but she couldn't afford to relax. "Naruto-san," Sasori began, his voice quiet, almost a whisper, "I understand that you may feel uncomfortable in our village. That's normal. But I want you to know that I'm on your side. We must work together, and I'm ready to support you in everything." His words sounded unexpectedly sincere, and Naruto felt her heart begin to beat faster again. She didn't expect to hear that from Sasori, and it only increased her sense of unease. Something in his words and tone made her think that this man was not as simple as he seemed. "Thank you, Sasori-san," she replied, trying not to show her doubts. "I hope that we can find common ground and make our alliance successful." Sasori nodded, but his gaze remained attentive, as if he was trying to read her thoughts. Naruto felt that their dialogue was not over yet, that there were many unresolved issues between them. As they stood up again and continued their walk through the village, Naruto felt the web of intrigue surrounding her and Sasori growing ever more tangled. Their union was supposed to be a symbol of peace and unity, but in reality it was filled with much more: secrets, omissions, and hidden motives that could lead to unpredictable consequences. In the evening, returning to her room, Naruto could not fall asleep for a long time. Her thoughts constantly returned to the conversation with the Kazekage and Sasori, to those words and looks that hid something more. She felt that a difficult path awaited her, full of trials and dangers. And although she was ready to meet them with dignity, inside her there were still doubts that she could not get rid of. She knew that Sasori was playing a game, and that it was her job to figure out what that game was before she fell victim to it. Naruto was determined to find out the truth, even if it meant risking everything she had. Chapter 6, First Doubts. After a tense conversation with the Kazekage and Sasori, Naruto decided that she needed some time to compose herself. Her thoughts were jumbled, and she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something dark and disturbing behind Sasori's calm and confident words. She felt the uneasiness growing inside her, but she tried not to give in to it. Her duty to the village was more important than her personal fears, and she knew that she had to stay strong. Naruto walked slowly through the narrow streets of Suna, trying to focus on the scenery around her. The sandstone buildings cast long shadows under the blazing sun. The heat enveloped her, penetrating every cell of her body, but it did not bring her peace. Instead, the feeling of heaviness only increased the tension within her, as if the desert heat was a symbol of her own struggle. She walked aimlessly, hoping that the walk would help her clear her head and put everything in its place. But the longer she walked, the more she realized that her thoughts kept returning to Sasori. His behavior, his words, even his gaze, all of it seemed somehow unreal to her, as if another, much more dangerous person was hiding behind this image. Why am I so afraid of him? Naruto asked herself, but she couldn't find an answer. Sasori was calm and confident, but something in his gaze made her heart beat faster, and her intuition told her that this was a man to be on guard for. Perhaps it wasn't so much his personality that scared her, but the fact that she couldn't figure him out, couldn't understand who he really was. Her thoughts were interrupted by a quiet but familiar voice. Naruto-san? She turned around and saw Gaara standing a little to the side. His face was calm, but there was a slight surprise in his eyes. Apparently, he didn't expect to meet her here, among the deserted streets of Suna. Gaara, Naruto said with relief, her tension easing slightly at the sight of a familiar face. Are you okay? The boy approached her, his footsteps almost silent on the hot sand. Despite his appearance, which could seem cold and withdrawn, Naruto noticed something touching about him, which made her smile. I'm fine, Gaara replied, raising his bottomless gaze to her. And you? Did something happen? Naruto felt something stir inside her. Gaara's question was simple, even mundane, but there was genuine concern in it. She thought for a moment before answering. There's just a lot going on, she said finally, trying to sound calm. New city, new people. It can be a little scary sometimes. Gaara nodded as if he understood her feelings. His gaze remained attentive, and Naruto felt like she could speak frankly to him without fear of judgment. I understand, he said quietly, looking away, as if remembering something of his own. I was scared once, too. But over time, everything becomes easier if there is someone who understands you. His words touched something deep inside her. Naruto remembered her childhood, when she, like Gaara, was lonely and felt like the whole world was against her. She too felt like no one understood her, that she would always be alone. But then she met friends who helped her overcome that pain, and she began to find her way in the world. Yeah, you're right, Naruto agreed, her smile growing a little wider. Sometimes it only takes one person to change everything. Gaara looked at her, a warm spark in his eyes. He seemed to understand that they shared something more than just the friendship of two villages. They shared pain, shared fears that they each overcame in their own way. You look tired, Gaara noted, interrupting her thoughts. Maybe you should rest? Naruto nodded. He was right, all those days of stress and anxiety were starting to take their toll on her. She could feel the fatigue growing inside her, but she couldn't afford to be weak. You may be right, she replied. I really need some rest. They continued walking together, taking their time, enjoying the silence and each other's company. Naruto noticed that when she was with Gaara, her thoughts became calmer, and her worries faded into the background. He didn't ask unnecessary questions, didn't try to impose his opinion, he was just there, and that was enough. Gaara, she suddenly spoke, her voice quiet and thoughtful, have you ever felt like something was wrong, but couldn't figure out what it was? The boy stopped and looked at her, his eyes seemed to pierce right through her, and Naruto felt the anxiety rising in her chest again. Yes, he answered after a short pause. Sometimes it seems to me that the world around me is changing, but I can't understand how exactly. It's scary, but I try not to think about it. I know that I can't control everything that happens around me. His words sounded simple, but Naruto felt a deep meaning in them. She understood that Gaara also had doubts, but he had learned to accept them and live with them. He did not fight what he could not change, and this helped him maintain inner peace. Those are wise words, Gaara, she said, trying to remember his advice. I think I need to learn this. Sometimes I feel like I'm trying to control too much. Gaara smiled softly, and Naruto felt her heart lighten a little. They continued walking again, and soon reached a small square surrounded by shops and houses. Naruto remembered how she had dreamed of such simple joys as a child, walking down the street with a friend, enjoying the silence and feeling part of the world. But her dreams had seemed so far away, almost unattainable. She was a child who had been shunned, a child who couldn't find a place for herself in the world. But now, as she stood next to Gaara, she knew that her dreams had come true after all, even if not quite the way she had imagined. Sometimes I think, Naruto said suddenly, her voice quiet, almost a whisper, that if things had turned out differently, I could have been someone else. Lived a different life, been a different person. Gaara stopped and looked at her in surprise, his gaze full of understanding and sympathy. But then you wouldn't be yourself, he replied, his voice soft and confident. And that would be a great loss to the world. You are strong, Naruto. And you should be who you are. His words touched the very depths of her soul, and Naruto felt her doubts begin to dissipate. She realized that Gaara was right, she couldn't be anyone else, and perhaps that was where her strength lay. Thank you, Gaara, she said, smiling at him. You're right. I have to be myself and do what I think is right. They sat in the square for a while longer, enjoying the silence and the warmth of the sun. Naruto felt her anxiety slowly fading, leaving room for new thoughts and solutions. She knew that many more trials awaited her, but now she had more confidence that she could handle them. When they finally stood up to continue their journey, Naruto felt renewed. She was no longer afraid of her doubts and worries, she knew how to deal with them now. Gaara had been the one to help her see that strength wasn't about not having fear, but about accepting it and continuing to move forward. They said goodbye and Naruto headed back to her temporary housing. On the way, her thoughts returned to Sasori and what he had said. But now these thoughts no longer caused her such anxiety. She realized that she should not be afraid of what she could not understand. Her task was to move forward, make decisions, and be ready for any challenge. As Naruto entered her room, she felt tiredness wash over her, but it was a pleasant tiredness, like after a long day of work and thinking. She laid down on her bed and closed her eyes, allowing herself to rest for a bit. Her mind was full of new thoughts, but now they did not disturb her, but on the contrary, helped her to feel more confident. She knew that new encounters and trials awaited her ahead, but now she had something that helped her to cope with them, her own strength, which she began to understand and accept. Soon Naruto fell asleep, and her sleep was calm, serene, like that of a person who had found answers to her questions and was ready for new achievements. Chapter 7, Secret Meeting. Night had fallen over Suna with its dark blanket, and the village was silent, broken only by the occasional gust of wind that carried sand from the desert. The streets, usually filled with people and merchants, were now lifeless, and it seemed as if the village itself had fallen into a deep sleep. The moon, like a guard, watched over this silent world, casting a weak light on the stone walls of the buildings. Naruto was about to go to bed when she heard a soft knock on her room door. It was strange, no one was supposed to disturb her at this hour. Her heart began to beat faster as she slowly walked up to the door and opened it. A young girl, one of the Kazakage's maids, stood before her, a worried expression on her face. In her hands was a folded letter. "This is for you, Naruto-san," the girl whispered, holding out the letter. "It arrived a few minutes ago. Please read it in private." Naruto took the letter, feeling anxiety growing inside her. The maid, without waiting for a response, quickly left, leaving Naruto alone with this cryptic message. She closed the door, feeling her hands shaking slightly, and sat on the edge of the bed to read the message. The letter was short and written in neat but sharp handwriting. It only contained a few words: "Meet me in an hour at the old temple on the outskirts of the village. Don't tell anyone. This is important." There was no signature, but Naruto's intuition told her that this was a message she couldn't ignore. It might have been a trap, but something deep inside her told her that she had to go to the meeting. She quickly dressed, putting on a dark cloak to blend into the darkness of the night. She walked out of her room, trying not to attract attention, and headed towards the exit. The streets were empty, and Naruto moved forward, trying to stay in the shadows. Her thoughts were racing, a premonition of something important and dangerous did not leave her. The temple the letter spoke of was located on the very outskirts of the village, far from the main streets and square. It was ancient, long abandoned, and most of Suna's inhabitants avoided it, believing it to be cursed. Legend said that macabre rituals had once taken place there, and since then the temple had been abandoned to the mercy of time and the desert. As Naruto approached the temple, the moon had already disappeared behind the clouds, plunging everything into even deeper darkness. She stopped at the entrance, looking around. There was not a soul around, and only the soft whisper of the wind broke the deathly silence. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she knew she had to keep going. She walked inside carefully, trying not to make a sound. The inside of the temple was even darker than the outside, and Naruto had to stop for a few moments to let his eyes adjust to the darkness. Everything inside the temple was covered in a layer of dust and sand, and the old statues and altars seemed like ghostly figures, carved out of the darkness itself. Naruto. The voice was so quiet that Naruto didn't immediately recognize where it was coming from. She turned around and saw a figure standing in the shadow of one of the old altars. Her heart skipped a beat when she recognized that voice. "Shursui," she whispered, feeling the tension inside her increase. The shadowy figure stepped forward, and the moonlight that filtered through the broken windows of the temple illuminated Shursui's face. His gaze was serious, even dark, and Naruto knew that this meeting would not be easy. "Why are you here?" she asked, trying to remain calm but feeling her voice tremble slightly. Shursui came closer and Naruto saw his eyes glitter in the semi-darkness. He looked tense, as if he was weighing every word before he spoke it. "I had to meet you in secret," he began, his voice hoarse and quiet. "What I said could put your life and the lives of many others at risk. So I couldn't afford to speak of it openly." Naruto froze, feeling a chill rise up inside her. What could be so dangerous that Shursui would decide to meet her in this abandoned temple, away from everyone? Her thoughts were racing, but she tried to remain calm. "What's going on, Shursui?" she asked, feeling fear begin to creep up on her. "What kind of danger do you mean?" Shursui looked at her, his face showing deep concern. "There are rumors," he began, his voice quiet but tense. "Rumors that Sasori may be involved in dark deeds that could endanger not only your life, but the lives of everyone you care about." Naruto felt her heart clench. Those words came out of the blue. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, but Shursui's eyes said he wasn't joking. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice full of disbelief. "Sasori is one of the best shinobi in Suna. Why would anyone say such a thing about him?" Shursui came even closer, his face more serious than ever. "I can't tell you everything," he continued, his voice strained but sincere. "But you should know that there are people who believe that Sasori is playing a double game. He is not who he claims to be. There are suspicions that he is involved in an organization that is engaged in dark deeds. And if this is true, your life could be in danger." Naruto felt a sense of unease rising within her. She knew Shursui wouldn't say something like that unless he was sure of what he was saying. But she still found it hard to believe that Sasori would be involved in something like that. "What should I do?" she asked, feeling her voice tremble with excitement. Shursui looked at her, his eyes shining in the dim light. "You must be careful," he said, his voice firm. "Trust no one except those you have complete confidence in. If anything seems suspicious to you, do not hesitate to leave. I will be there if you need help. But most importantly, do not jump to conclusions. Give yourself time to think things over, and be prepared for any surprises." Naruto nodded, still feeling doubts raging inside her. She knew Shursui was telling the truth, but she was having a hard time accepting what she was hearing. Her thoughts kept returning to Sasori and the strange sensation she felt in his presence. Maybe she really did feel something was wrong, but she didn't want to believe it? "Shursui," she began, her voice quiet and hesitant, "why did you decide to tell me this? You could have just left it at that and not interfered." Shursui was silent for a moment, his gaze softening. "Because I can't let you get into danger," he replied, his voice full of sincerity. "You're important to me, Naruto. I can't stand by and watch you get hurt. That's why I had to warn you, even if it puts me in danger." Naruto felt her heart clench at those words. She knew Shursui had always been there for her, always supporting her, but now she realized how much he cared about her. It was both touching and frightening. Thank you, Shursui, she said, her voice full of gratitude. I appreciate your concern. I'll try to be careful. Shursui nodded, his face becoming serious again. I know you can do it, he said, his voice confident. You're strong, Naruto. But remember, if you need help, I'll always be here. Naruto nodded again, feeling determination rise up inside her. She knew there would be hard times ahead, but now she had support, and that gave her strength. I'll walk with you to your room, Shursui offered, and Naruto agreed. They left the temple together, and as they walked outside, Naruto felt the night air cool her heated thoughts slightly. The silence of the night surrounded them again, and they walked side by side, not exchanging words, but feeling each other's support. When they reached her temporary quarters, Naruto stopped at the door and turned to Shursui. Thank you for everything, she said, looking into his eyes. I'll be careful. Shursui nodded, his face was calm, but his eyes were filled with worry. Take care, Naruto, he said quietly. I'll be here if anything goes wrong. She nodded and he left, disappearing into the night like a shadow. Naruto stood by the door, feeling conflicting emotions battling within her. She knew there were tough decisions ahead, but she now had more confidence that she could handle them. As Naruto entered her room, she felt her fatigue creeping up on her with renewed vigor. She sat down on her bed, thinking about what she had heard. Sasori. Could he really be involved in dark deeds? Her heart refused to believe it, but her mind told her to be careful. Her premonitions, which she had felt from the very beginning, were now more pronounced. She felt that behind Sasori's calm and confident image, there was something much more dangerous. But what exactly? She had yet to find out, but she knew that she had to be prepared for any eventuality. Naruto laid down on the bed, closing her eyes and trying to relax. Her thoughts were still filled with worry, but now there was a new determination in them. She knew that she couldn't just wait and hope for the best. She had to take action, even if it put her in a dangerous situation. Before she fell asleep, she decided that tomorrow she would take action. She had to find out the truth about Sasori and his deeds, but she had to remain careful and not give away her suspicions. She had to be prepared for the fact that she might encounter something much more serious than she expected. With these thoughts, Naruto gradually fell asleep, full of determination and readiness for the new challenges that awaited her ahead. Chapter 8, Internal Conflict. Returning to her place after meeting with Shursui, Naruto felt the uneasiness growing inside her, like a thick shadow that was impossible to hide from. The night darkness that enveloped the streets of Suna seemed to mirror her own state, gloomy, uncertain, full of hidden dangers. Every step she took echoed in her head, and thoughts like violent waves crashed against the shores of her mind, giving her no peace. Doubt and fear of the unknown grew stronger with each passing moment. Her entire life, her duty to the village, her clan, and herself were now at risk. Naruto could not afford to be weak, but the feeling that she was standing on the edge of an abyss did not leave her. When she finally reached her room, her hands were shaking slightly. She closed the door behind her, leaning her back against it as if trying to hold back the storm of emotions that were about to burst out. She took a deep breath and tried to organize her thoughts, but her mind was too overwhelmed to find any peace. Naruto walked to the window and looked at the night sky. The stars were flickering faintly, almost unnoticeably, like her own hopes that seemed so fragile and distant. She knew that her duty to the village and clan should come first, but personal feelings and fears were beginning to destroy her from within. It was an internal conflict that she could no longer ignore. Her mind raced between several possible scenarios. What if Shursui was right, and Sasori really was involved in dark deeds? How should she act? Her duty to Konoha demanded that she expose any threat, but her heart refused to believe that the man who was to be her husband was capable of such actions. Her feelings for Sasori were complex, a mixture of distrust, respect, and a hidden affection that she couldn't explain even to herself. How can I make the right decision if I don't know the whole truth? Naruto thought, feeling the fear of a possible mistake growing inside her. She couldn't afford to make a mistake, because not only her own life depended on it, but also the fate of many people, including her loved ones and friends. Naruto felt her head begin to ache from the tension. She walked over to the table where the scroll with the messages from Konoha was lying. She hadn't opened it since she arrived in Suna. A voice inside her told her that now was the time to find out what was written there. After unsealing the scroll, Naruto began to read. It contained details about the current events in Konoha, recommendations from the elders, and personal words of encouragement from the Hokage, her father. His words were full of concern and confidence in her abilities, but they could not dispel her doubts. She read his words several times, hoping to find an answer to her questions, but there was no answer. She knew that her duty to the village was more than just a formality. It was a responsibility she had carried since childhood, knowing that her fate would always be tied to Konoha's. But what if her duty required her to sacrifice her feelings, her fears, and even her life? Could she do that, knowing that the price might be too high? Naruto sat on the bed, feeling a battle raging inside her. Her mind told her that she had to follow her duty, but her heart resisted, unwilling to accept this reality. Her doubts and fears began to destroy her from the inside, like a poison slowly spreading through her veins. She felt that if she did not find a way to resolve this conflict, she would end up losing herself. Her thoughts returned to Sasori. The man seemed to be the embodiment of cold-bloodedness and calculation. His actions and words were always thought out to the smallest detail, but Naruto felt that there was something more behind that mask. His eyes, when he looked at her, expressed not just interest, but also some deep pain that he hid from everyone, even from himself. "Who are you, Sasori?" she asked herself, but she could not find an answer. Every time she tried to get closer to the solution, she was overcome with fear. Perhaps not so much fear of Sasori, but of what she might learn about him and about herself. Naruto remembered Shirsui's words. He had warned her of possible danger, but he couldn't provide any concrete evidence. His words were full of care and concern, but could they be the basis for making a serious decision? Could she act based on rumors and guesses alone, putting not only her own life at risk, but the lives of others as well? This internal conflict, tearing her apart, became more and more unbearable. Her duty to the village demanded decisive action, but personal feelings kept her from hasty steps. She knew that any action she took could have serious consequences, and this weighed on her more and more. Her mind and heart seemed to be in a never-ending battle, and Naruto didn't know which side to take. Her mind told her to be careful, to follow her duty, and to expose any threat. But her heart whispered that Sasori was more than just an enemy, that behind his cold demeanor there was a man who might not be what everyone thought. Naruto stood up and began to pace the room, trying to find some kind of solution. Her fears and doubts seemed overwhelming, and she felt panic rising inside her. But at that moment, she remembered Gaara's words, "Sometimes, it only takes one person to change everything." Those words seemed to open up a new path for her. She might not be able to sort out her feelings and fears right away, but she could start small. Instead of trying to find answers to everything at once, she could start by seeking the truth. Her duty to the village and clan was not just to follow orders, but to protect truth and justice. Naruto stopped at the window and looked up at the night sky. The stars were still twinkling, but they didn't seem so far away anymore. She felt her heart begin to calm down and her mind clear. She realized that the only way to resolve the conflict within her was to act with her heart as well as her mind. She decided that she had to talk to Sasori. She needed to know the truth, to look him in the eye and understand who he really was. Maybe this conversation wouldn't give her all the answers, but it would help her understand herself and her feelings. She knew that this step could be dangerous, but she had no other choice. The next morning, Naruto woke up earlier than usual, feeling that this day would be crucial. Her thoughts were still full of doubts, but now they had a purpose. She decided that she would not put off this conversation any longer. If Sasori was truly involved in dark deeds, she had to find out. If he was innocent, she could find common ground with him and build an alliance that would benefit both villages. Naruto quickly dressed and left her room. The streets of Suno were still empty, but she knew that time was against her. If the rumors about Sasori were true, then her actions would have to be quick and decisive. She headed to the place where she believed Sasori might be. When she reached his apartment, her heart began to beat faster. She stood in front of the door, feeling the anxiety rising inside her again. But now this anxiety was under control, her thoughts were clear, and her goal was clear. She knew what she had to do, and she could no longer afford to back down. She knocked on the door, and a moment later Sasori opened it. His face was calm, but Naruto caught a slight glimmer of surprise in his eyes. He clearly hadn't expected to see her so early. "Naruto-san," he said, bowing his head slightly in greeting. "What brings you to me at this time?" Naruto felt her voice shake slightly, but she quickly pulled herself together. "We need to talk, Sasori-san," she replied, trying to sound as calm as possible. "There are things I need to know." Sasori nodded, inviting her in. His movements were smooth as always, and Naruto felt doubts rising in her heart again. But she pushed them away. Now was not the time for doubts. Once they were both inside, Sasori invited Naruto to sit down. She accepted, trying not to show how much she cared about this conversation. "What did you want to talk about?" Sasori asked, his voice even, but with a hint of wariness. Naruto looked him straight in the eyes, trying to catch even the slightest hint of what was hidden behind his calmness. "I've heard rumors," she began, choosing her words as carefully as possible. "Rumors that you might be involved in things that could put the lives of many people at risk. I don't want to believe it, but I need to know the truth." Sasori listened to her attentively, his face remaining impassive, as if she was talking about something ordinary. "Rumors can be dangerous, Naruto-san," he said, his voice soft but with an undercurrent of menace. "They can destroy trust and lead to unpredictable consequences. But I understand that you want to understand the situation." Naruto nodded, feeling the anxiety rise up inside her again. His words seemed so right, but something about them made her wary. "That's why I came to you to hear your version," she continued, trying not to show her doubts. "If you are really involved in something dark, it could jeopardize our alliance. And if it's just rumors, I need to know the truth to protect you and our alliance." Sasori looked at her for a long moment, and Naruto felt as if time had slowed down. His eyes, usually so calm and cold, now seemed deep, like bottomless wells. She couldn't understand what he was thinking, but she felt that this moment was decisive. "Naruto-san," he finally said, his voice quiet but penetrating, "the shinobi world is full of mystery and intrigue. Sometimes what seems true turns out to be a lie, and vice versa. I can't prove my innocence to you, because that would require breaking the trust we're just beginning to build. But I can tell you one thing, if I were really involved in something dark, you would already know about it." His words hung in the air, and Naruto felt a new conflict flaring up inside her. She couldn't figure out what to do next. Her mind was telling her to be careful, but her heart was telling her that Sasori might be the one to save her from her own fears. Naruto was silent for a long moment, considering his words. She knew that she needed time to sort out her feelings and make the right decision. But one thing was clear, she couldn't afford to make a mistake. Her duty to the village and clan came first, but she also knew that she had to follow her heart. "I'll be careful," she finally said, her voice quiet but firm. "But I want to trust you, Sasori-san. And if you're truly on my side, I hope you'll prove it." Sasori nodded, his face remaining calm, but in Naruto's eyes she caught a glimmer of something she couldn't explain. "I will do everything in my power to justify your trust," he replied, his voice sincere. "But remember that the shinobi world is not always what it seems at first glance. We must be prepared for anything." Naruto nodded, agreeing with him. She understood that their conversation was only the beginning of a long journey, where she would have to sort out her feelings and find the truth. Her internal conflict was not yet resolved, but now she had a goal, to understand who Sasori really was and what role he played in her life. As she left Sasori's quarters, her thoughts once again began to swirl in doubt and worry. She knew she couldn't afford to be weak, but she also knew that her feelings and fears played a major role in her decisions. She had to find a balance between duty and heart, and it wouldn't be an easy path. Returning to herself, Naruto felt her inner conflict continue to destroy her from the inside. But now she had a goal, and that gave her the strength to continue. She knew that there would be difficult trials ahead, but she was ready to face them with dignity and determination. She walked into her room, feeling the fatigue creeping up on her. Her thoughts were still full of doubts, but now there was a new determination in them. She knew she couldn't afford to be wrong, but she also knew that the only way to find the truth was to follow her heart. Laying down on the bed, Naruto closed her eyes, allowing herself to rest for a while. Her internal conflict was not yet resolved, but now she knew that she would fight until the end to find answers to her questions. And in this fight, she would not be alone. Chapter 9, The Solution. The next morning, as the first rays of the sun began to slowly rise above the horizon, Naruto was no longer asleep. Her sleep was restless, filled with dark images and disturbing thoughts. Everything that had happened the day before had left a deep mark on her soul, and she knew that she could no longer remain on the sidelines. Her internal conflict had reached its peak, and she knew that the time had come to make a decision. Her intuition, which she always trusted, told her that she could not delay any longer. Naruto could not simply sit and watch events unfold around her. Her duty to the village, her clan, and herself demanded decisive action. She knew that she had to meet Sasori and find out the truth, even if it led to unpleasant consequences. Naruto stood up, her movements quick and sure, like someone who had finally found a target. She dressed, put on her cloak, and walked out of her room. Her thoughts were focused on the upcoming conversation with Sasori, and she was preparing herself for the conversation to change everything. The sun had already risen above the desert, illuminating the streets of Suno with its searing light, when Naruto approached Sasori's dwelling. At this early hour, the village was still quiet, and she hoped that she could speak with him without unnecessary witnesses. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she was determined not to back down. She knocked on the door, and a few moments later Sasori opened it. He was dressed in simple clothes, but his face was wary. Apparently, he hadn't expected to see her so early. "Naruto-san," he said, bowing his head slightly in greeting. "What brings you here so early?" Naruto didn't waste time on formalities. She stepped inside, feeling the tension building inside her. "We need to talk, Sasori-san," she began, her voice firm but with an underlying worry. "I can't wait and watch anymore. I need to know the truth." Sasori slowly closed the door and turned to face her. His face remained calm, but there was something in his eyes that Naruto couldn't immediately decipher. "I understand," he said quietly, his voice even and cold. "You want to know who I really am. Well, that is your duty, and I respect that." Naruto sat down at a small table, her hands shaking slightly, but she tried not to show it. Her gaze was fixed on Sasori, who stood in front of her, his arms crossed over his chest. His presence was heavy, as if darkness was gathering around him. "I've been thinking for a long time," Naruto began, her voice quiet but determined. "And I realized that I can't stay in the dark any longer. If you're really involved in something dark, it could put not only me, but many others in danger. I have to find out the truth, even if it hurts." Sasori nodded slowly, his gaze unreadable. He came closer and sat down opposite her. His face was serious, but there was something in his eyes that Naruto couldn't immediately recognize. "You're right," he said, his voice quiet but with a hidden strength. "I'm not who people think I am. But before I tell you the truth, you must understand one thing: the world is not black and white. It's many shades of gray, and sometimes what seems evil may actually be the only way out." Naruto frowned, her heart beating faster. She hadn't expected those words, but now she realized that the truth might be more complicated than she thought. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice full of curiosity and concern. Sasori leaned back in his chair, his eyes focused on Naruto. My goals, my actions, these are not mere whims or lust for power, he began, his voice even, like a man who carefully considers every word. I do what I consider necessary to achieve my goals. I do not seek destruction or power for its own sake. But sometimes, to achieve my goals, you have to sacrifice a lot. Naruto felt a sense of unease flare up inside her. His words sounded like an excuse, but she felt like there was something much more serious hidden behind them. And what are these goals? She asked, her voice full of tension. What drives you, Sasori-san? Sasori was silent for a moment, his eyes glittering in the dim light of the room. I strive for an ideal world, he said quietly, his voice full of determination. A world where there is no place for pain, suffering, and betrayal. But to create such a world, we must destroy the old one. We must get rid of everything that keeps people in the chains of illusions and false hopes. His words came out of nowhere. Naruto felt her insides twist. She couldn't believe that Sasori actually believed what he was saying. His idea of a perfect world sounded nice, but the path he chose was dangerous and destructive. But can peace be achieved through destruction? She asked, her voice full of doubt. Won't that lead to more suffering? Sasori looked at her with a slight smile that contained neither joy nor warmth. Sometimes, to create something new, you have to destroy the old, he replied, his voice calm but with an underlying threat. I'm not afraid to sacrifice for a greater cause. If you're not ready to understand that, then you're still attached to old illusions. Naruto felt fear growing inside her. She couldn't believe that the man she was supposed to know and understand actually believed in such things. His words were full of determination, but she felt that there was deep pain and loneliness hidden behind them. But what will this world give you if there are no people in it who support you? She asked, her voice filled with worry. You can't create a perfect world on your own, Sasori-san. You need allies, people who believe in you and support you. Sasori was silent for a moment, his face becoming more tense. I know that, he said finally, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. But people are afraid of change. They cling to the old, even if it hurts them. They are not willing to sacrifice for a greater cause. That's why I can't trust anyone but myself. Naruto felt something inside her tremble. His words were full of bitterness and disappointment, but she knew there was some truth in them. Sasori was a man who saw the world differently, and his path was full of loneliness and suffering. But could that justify his actions? But what if I'm willing to understand you? She asked, her voice full of determination. What if I'm willing to support you, even if it's difficult? Sasori looked at her, his eyes full of doubt. Why do you want to do this? He asked, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. What makes you take the risk? Naruto took a deep breath, feeling the answer building within her. Because I believe that every person deserves a chance, she said, her voice full of confidence. Even if the path is difficult and full of mistakes. I believe that there is something bright in each of us, and it is worth fighting for. Sasori looked at her for a long time, his face remained impassive, but something flashed in his eyes that Naruto couldn't immediately recognize. You surprise me, Naruto-san, he finally said, his voice was quiet, but there was a sense of respect. I didn't expect you to be able to understand me. Naruto felt a wave of relief rise up inside her. She knew that this conversation was an important step in understanding Sasori, and now she saw that their relationship could be the key to changing everything that was happening around them. We must work together, she said, her voice full of determination. I want to help you, but only if you are honest with me. We can achieve great things, but it takes trust. Sasori nodded, his face becoming more relaxed. I agree, he said, his voice soft but firm. I'll be honest with you, Naruto-san. If we want to achieve something great, we must work together. Naruto felt a sense of satisfaction rise up inside her. She knew that this step was important not only for her, but for everything she held dear. She now had more confidence that they could handle the challenges ahead. As they finished their conversation, Naruto felt a sense of peace finally come to her. The internal conflict that had been tearing her apart began to subside. she now knew that her path was not to fight Sasori, but to work together with him to achieve a common goal. She left Sasori's quarters with a new responsibility on her shoulders. Her decision had been made, and she knew that many difficulties lay ahead, but now she had an ally. She was no longer alone in her fight. Returning to herself, Naruto felt a new strength building within her. Her intuition, her heart, and her mind were finally in alignment. She knew that her duty to the village and clan required decisive action, but now she saw that those actions could be based on trust and understanding. As Naruto lay down to sleep, she felt her thoughts begin to calm down. She knew she had made the right choice, and was now ready to face whatever trials fate had in store for her. Her resolve was firm, and she knew she would fight to the end to protect what was dear to her. With these thoughts, she fell asleep, feeling peace coming inside her. Now she had not only a duty, but also a goal, and she was ready to fight for it to the last. Chapter 10, Dangerous Game. Naruto couldn't help but feel like her life had become a complicated and dangerous game, where every action, every word, could have disastrous consequences. After her conversation with Sasori, she realized that she was now caught up in a chain of events that went far beyond her previous understanding of duty and responsibility. These thoughts did not give her peace. Her mind, trying to comprehend what was happening, constantly returned to what she learned from Sasori. He revealed to her his ambitions, his desire to create an ideal world through the destruction of the old one. This made Naruto look at the shinobi world from a different angle, to understand that there were too many dark shades in it, and that not all heroes were flawless. Now that she realized the gravity of the situation, Naruto knew she had to act quickly and decisively. Any mistake could spell disaster for her and her village. Her duty to Konoha had become even more important, but now it was intertwined with personal feelings, with a desire to understand and perhaps save the man who had become more than just an ally to her. With that thought in mind, Naruto began to prepare for action. She knew that she would have a hard time dealing with what was coming alone. But she also knew that she had to be careful in choosing her allies. Anyone could be an enemy, and there was no room for gullibility in this game. Naruto decided that she needed to learn more about what was going on in Suna. She needed to understand what forces were behind Sasori and how far they were willing to go to achieve their goals. Things were moving too fast, and Naruto felt like time was working against her. The first step was to visit the Suna archives. She knew that they contained records that could shed light on the true intentions of Sasori and those who supported him. But access to these archives was restricted, and Naruto knew that she would have to act covertly. Night had already begun to fall on the village as Naruto, hiding in the shadows, made her way towards the building where the important documents were kept. She knew that her actions could be noticed, so she moved carefully, trying not to attract attention. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she couldn't afford to doubt. There was too much at stake. As Naruto approached the building, she scanned the surrounding area, trying to see if there was any security nearby. To her relief, the security was minimal. Apparently no one was expecting anyone to break into the archives. Using her shinobi skills, she silently entered. It was dark and cool inside the building. The corridors leading to the archive rooms were long and shadowy, and Naruto had to move slowly to avoid giving herself away. She knew the documents she needed were in the deepest vault. When she reached the room, she was met with rows of shelves lined with scrolls and notes. Each scroll was carefully labeled, and Naruto realized that this place held the history and secrets of Suna that could change everything. But she needed to find specific information, one that could shed light on the plans of Sasori and his followers. She began to sort through the scrolls, trying to work quickly but carefully. Each document she found could be important, but there was little time to study them. Her gaze darted from one scroll to the next until she finally found what she was looking for. It was a scroll marked Project Ouroboros. The name sounded familiar, and she quickly unrolled the scroll to read its contents. The contents of the scroll gave Naruto goosebumps. It described a plan that involved using dangerous technology to create a new type of weapon that could wipe out entire villages. This project was being developed in great secrecy, and involved high-ranking members of Suna. Sasori was one of the key figures in this project, and his role was to develop and test the weapon. Naruto felt her insides twist. She realized that Sasori was indeed involved in something far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. His ambition and desire to create a perfect world had led him down a path that could have ended in disaster for many people. But the scariest thing was that this project was already in its final stages. Sasori and his allies were preparing for the final stage, which included testing the weapon on one of the neighboring villages. If this plan was carried out, the consequences could be horrific. Naruto knew she had to act now. She couldn't let this project be completed. Her duty to Konoha demanded decisive action, but now it wasn't just her village that was at stake, it was the entire world. She had to stop Sasori, even if it meant confronting him. Rolling up the scroll, Naruto carefully put it back in place and left the archives. Her thoughts were focused on the best course of action. She knew she couldn't do this alone, but she also knew she couldn't trust anyone but those closest to her. She needed to find allies who could help her stop this project. As Naruto returned to her room, her thoughts were torn between doubt and determination. She knew that she could not afford to make a mistake now. Her actions had to be carefully considered to avoid disaster. She knew that she had entered a dangerous game, where the lives of many people were at stake, and that her role in this game would be key. Naruto decided that the first step would be to talk to Shisui. He was one of the few people she could trust in this situation. She knew that his experience and knowledge would help her make the right decisions. Her inner voice told her that this conversation would be important not only for her plans, but also for her own understanding of what lay ahead. When she met Shisui the next day, his face was filled with worry. He already knew something was going on and was prepared for the worst. "Naruto, what happened?" he asked, his voice quiet but tense. Naruto told him everything she had learned, and his face grew more and more serious. He realized that the situation was much more dangerous than they could have imagined. "It's worse than I thought," Shisui said as Naruto finished her story. "If they're really going to use that weapon, we need to stop them as soon as possible." Naruto nodded, her face showing determination. "I know," she replied. "But we must proceed with caution. If we make a mistake, the consequences could be disastrous." Shisui was silent for a moment, considering her words. "Do we have a plan?" he finally asked, his voice full of determination. Naruto took a deep breath. "I think we need to start with Sasori," she said. "If we can convince him that this path will lead to disaster, perhaps he'll agree to help us stop the project. But if not, then we need to be prepared for the worst." Shisui nodded, his face remaining serious. "I agree," he said. "But we must be prepared for the possibility that Sasori may not agree with us. If he is determined to see the project through to completion, we will have no choice." Naruto knew that Shisui was right. This conversation with Sasori could be decisive, but she also knew that she had to be prepared for things not to go as she hoped. As they decided to act, Naruto felt the tension building inside her. She knew that there would be difficult trials ahead, and that this game was actually more dangerous than she could have imagined. Her duty to the village was mixed with her personal feelings, and now every decision she made had to be weighed and considered. In the evening, when she met Sasori again, she felt the anxiety rising inside her again. His face was calm, but there was a wariness in his eyes. They both knew that this conversation would be key. "Sasori," Naruto began, her voice firm but tense. "I've learned of Project Ouroboros. We can't allow it to be completed. It would be disastrous." Sasori was silent for a moment, his gaze becoming more serious. "Do you really think you can stop this?" he asked, his voice full of disbelief. Naruto looked into his eyes, her heart beating faster. "I know we have to do this," she replied. "If you don't stop, the consequences will be terrible. I don't want this world to fall apart." Sasori looked at her for a long moment, his face impassive. But then he took a step forward, his gaze softening, but there was deep pain in it. Do you think I want to destroy this world? He asked quietly, his voice full of bitterness. I want to save it, Naruto. But to create something new, you need to destroy the old. I am not afraid of sacrifices for a greater goal. Naruto felt her insides clench. She knew that Sasori believed in his words, but she also knew that his path would lead to the deaths of many people. I can't let you do this, she said firmly. Even if you believe it's right, I can't support you in this. We have to find another way. Sasori was silent for a moment, his gaze becoming more thoughtful. You may be right, he said finally, his voice quiet. Perhaps I was wrong. But if you want to stop this project, you'll have to face those who support it. And it won't be easy. Naruto nodded, knowing that Sasori wouldn't give her easy answers. But she could also see that he was starting to doubt his actions. I'm ready for it, she replied. We will fight to the end to stop this project. Sasori looked at her, and Naruto saw something new in his eyes, respect and perhaps hope. Okay, he said quietly. I'll help you. But know that this will be a dangerous game. And there's no room for error. Naruto knew that she had now entered a new phase of this game. She knew that there would be difficult trials ahead, but now she had an ally. Sasori was on her side, and that gave her hope that they could stop the impending disaster. As they parted ways, Naruto felt a sense of determination rise within her. She knew this game would be dangerous, but she was ready for it now. Her duty to the village, her personal feelings, and her alliance with Sasori became her motivation. She was no longer afraid, she was ready to fight to the end. Hashtag Chapter 11, Conspiracy. Over the course of several days, the atmosphere in Suna began to heat up. The rumors that had been spreading through the village like fire were beginning to turn into a dangerous flame, threatening to engulf everyone caught up in this complex web of intrigue and conspiracy. At the center of all this chaos were Naruto and Sasori, whose actions were beginning to attract more and more attention. They both knew that any mistake could be fatal. Naruto watched the scene with growing alarm. Rumors of a possible plot against the Kazekage were spreading like wildfire among the people of Suna. Every day brought new gossip and speculation, and the growing paranoia made people look at each other with distrust. There was a sense of foreboding in the air, and Naruto knew that if she and Sasori failed to identify the true conspirators in time, the consequences would be catastrophic. Naruto sensed that the center of this conspiracy was closer than she thought. Her intuition, which she had learned to trust, told her that the key figures were hiding among those who stood close to the Kazekage. But determining who exactly was behind this plan was more difficult than it seemed at first glance. Everything pointed to the fact that experienced players were involved, willing to do anything to achieve their goals. Meanwhile, Sasori began to actively use his connections and influence to manipulate the situation to his advantage. He knew that time was against him, and he understood that without action, everything could end in failure. His mind was full of strategies and plans, but each of them required the utmost caution. Sasori acted like an experienced puppeteer, discreetly directing the threads that connected all the participants in this deadly spectacle. Naruto watched his actions, trying to gauge how far he was willing to go. She saw how he spoke to various influential figures in Suna, how he chose his words carefully and deliberately, convincing them of his loyalty. But despite all this, Naruto knew that Sasori was still playing his own game, and her involvement in this plot was no accident. One of the key moments was that Naruto began to notice strange coincidences. Several people she had spoken to previously had suddenly disappeared or died under mysterious circumstances. This increased her suspicions that the conspiracy had already entered its active phase, and that those who tried to oppose it were being quickly eliminated. Her intuition told her that something was wrong. These murders and disappearances were too precise and timely to be a mere coincidence. Naruto knew that the true conspirators had to be somewhere nearby, and that they had already begun their actions. She decided it was time to take more active steps. Sasori was her ally, but his loyalty was still questionable. Naruto knew she had to watch her actions, but she also had to watch his. All her experience, knowledge, and intuition had to be used to prevent a catastrophe. The first step was meeting Kakashi. He was one of the few people Naruto could trust completely. They agreed to meet in a secluded place where their conversation could not be overheard. Naruto knew that Kakashi was always willing to help her, and now his help was needed more than ever. When they met, Naruto gave Kakashi a brief summary of everything she knew about the conspiracy and the Ouroboros project. Kakashi listened to her in silence, but his eyes showed deep concern. "Naruto, this is very dangerous," he said quietly when she finished. "If everything you say is true, then we are on the brink of disaster. But you must understand that any action we take now could lead to unpredictable consequences." Naruto nodded, her face tense. "I know, Kakashi," she replied. "But we can't sit idly by. We have to act. I can't let this project be completed, and I can't let the conspirators achieve their goals." Kakashi sighed, his gaze filled with worry. "I understand," he said, his voice soft but determined. "We must act, but we must be extremely careful. We cannot trust anyone except those we have complete confidence in. And before we do anything, we need to gather as much information as possible." Naruto agreed with him. She needed more data to figure out who was behind the plot and what their ultimate plan was. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she had no other choice. They decided that the first step would be to keep a closer eye on those close to the Kazekage. Naruto and Kakashi began to follow their movements, talk to their acquaintances, and look into their pasts. Each day brought new details that slowly began to form a coherent picture. Meanwhile, strange things began to happen in the village. The Kazekage became even more withdrawn, his entourage increased their security, and the number of secret meetings and discussions increased significantly. This was a clear sign that the conspirators were beginning to feel that their plans might be exposed. Naruto realized that time was against them. The conspirators were becoming more and more cautious, and every move they made was calculated to avoid detection. This made Naruto and her allies' task even more difficult. One of the key figures Naruto decided to keep a close eye on was a Suna council member known for his toughness and ambition. He was close to the Kazekage and had influence over the village's decision-making. His connections and past were full of secrets, and Naruto began to suspect that he might be one of the masterminds behind the plot. One night, Naruto decided to follow this man. She moved stealthily through the streets of Suna, trying not to attract attention. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she was completely focused on her task. If she could find out where this man was going and who he was meeting with, she could shed light on the entire conspiracy. As the council member approached one of the hidden passages that led to the old part of the village, Naruto slowed her steps. She saw him look around, make sure no one was watching him, and then go inside. Naruto knew there could be traps or security systems set up inside, but she had no choice. She had to find out what was going on. It was dark and damp inside. The walls were covered in moss and the floors creaked underfoot. Naruto moved carefully, trying not to make a sound. Soon she heard voices coming from the depths of the hallway. As she got closer, she began to make out words. "Everything is going according to plan. The project will be completed on time, and then we can get rid of the Kazekage and establish our own rules," one of the voices said. "We must be careful," the other replied. "Naruto and her allies have already begun to suspect something. If they learn the truth, all our plans could collapse." Naruto felt her blood boil. She finally had confirmation of her suspicions. The conspirators were indeed planning to get rid of the Kazekage and establish their own rule in Suna, using the Ouroboros project as a tool to achieve their goals. She continued listening, trying not to miss a single word. The conspirators discussed the details of their plan, assigning roles, and discussing how they would eliminate those who could interfere with their plans. Naruto realized that their network was much wider than she thought. The conspiracy involved not only the council members, but also some of the high-ranking shinobi who supported the Ouroboros project. Naruto knew she had to warn Kakashi and Sasori as soon as possible. She knew she wouldn't be able to stop the conspirators without their help. but first, she decided to wait to learn as much information as possible. She knew that every piece she could gather would be important to their plan. As the conspirators finished their conversation and began to leave the room, Naruto felt her heart beat faster. She knew that she had to be especially careful now so as not to give away her presence. She waited until the last of them had left before she began to carefully move back. Leaving the old part of the village, Naruto headed towards the meeting place with Kakashi and Sasori. Her thoughts were focused on how they could use the information they had received. She knew that they had the advantage now, but she also knew that the conspirators would stop at nothing to achieve their goal. When she got there, Kakashi and Sasori were already waiting for her. Naruto gave them a brief summary of what she had heard, and they realized that the situation was becoming increasingly critical. "We must act quickly," Kakashi said, his expression grim. "If we give them too much time, they might complete the project and eliminate the Kazekage before we can do anything." Sasori nodded, his eyes full of determination. "We must strike first," he said quietly. "If we can neutralize the key conspirators and destroy their base, we can stop this project before it is completed." Naruto agreed with them. She knew it was a dangerous game, with many lives at stake. But she also knew they had no other choice. They began to formulate a plan of action. Their goal was clear: neutralize the conspirators, destroy the Ouroboros project, and protect the Kazekage from traitors. Every action had to be carefully considered to avoid unpredictable consequences. For several days, Naruto, Kakashi, and Sasori operated covertly, gathering information and preparing for the final blow. The conspirators were still unaware that their plans had been discovered, giving Naruto's team an advantage. Finally, the moment came when everything was ready. Naruto knew that this day would be a turning point in their fight. She felt the tension rising inside her, but she also knew that this was the only way to save Suna and prevent disaster. The operation began at night, when the village was asleep. Naruto, Kakashi, and Sasori stealthily infiltrated key locations where the conspirators and the Ouroboros project equipment were located. Their every move was carefully coordinated, and soon they found themselves face to face with those behind the plot. The battle was fierce. The conspirators were stronger than they expected, but Naruto and her allies acted in a coordinated and decisive manner. During the battle, they destroyed most of the equipment and neutralized the main conspirators. When the dust settled, Naruto realized that they had won the battle, but the war was not over. The plot had been foiled, but a threat still hung over Suna. Now they had to deal with the aftermath and protect the village from further threats. Naruto knew that there were more trials ahead, but she was no longer alone. Together with Kakashi and Sasori, they were ready to face any challenge to protect those they loved and prevent disaster. The plot had been exposed, but the game was still on, and they had to be ready for anything. Chapter 12, Catch. Events were moving at an alarming speed. Naruto could feel everything around her beginning to move towards an inevitable climax. The conspirators, having learned that their plans had been discovered, decided to act immediately. Tension hung in the air, and Naruto knew that the moment would soon come when the fate of Suna would be decided in a single battle. The attack began at night, when the village was plunged into silence. But the silence was deceptive. Naruto could feel a storm brewing in the darkness. Her intuition told her that the conspirators had decided to strike a decisive blow. They could not afford to lose, and now they were ready to do anything to achieve their goal. Naruto and Sasori were in the thick of things. Their alliance, which had been based on mistrust and mutual suspicion, had now strengthened. They were beginning to realize that they could trust each other, and this new bond was giving them the strength to face the looming threat. There was a depth to their relationship that they could not yet fully comprehend, but which was already beginning to shape their actions. Sasori, who had grown accustomed to relying on his abilities as a manipulator and puppeteer, now worked closely with Naruto. He understood that their shared goal was not only to protect Suna, but also to prevent a catastrophe that could destroy everything they held dear. Naruto, in turn, saw how Sasori gradually opened up to her, and this gave her confidence that together they could overcome any challenge. As they began to move towards the location where the conspirators planned to strike, Naruto and Sasori felt their determination grow within them. They knew that they were in for a tough fight, and that many lives depended on the outcome of this battle. There was a path ahead that could lead to victory or defeat, but they could not afford to make a mistake. They arrived at a hidden bunker, where they knew the conspirators were going to activate the remaining devices of the Ouroboros project. The bunker was deep in the desert, surrounded by high dunes that kept it hidden from view. Its massive metal doors were closed, and Naruto knew it wouldn't be easy to get inside. "We must be careful," Sasori said, looking around. His eyes slid over the shadows around them, as if searching for signs of enemies. "They know we're coming. It'll be a trap." Naruto nodded, her face focused. "We have no choice," she replied. "We must get inside and stop them before they activate the devices. If we fail, the consequences will be dire." Sasori looked at Naruto for a moment, his eyes filled with respect and understanding. He knew that this moment would test their alliance, and he was ready to fight alongside her. "Stay close," he said, and together they walked toward the massive doors of the bunker. Naruto used her skills to bypass the protective barriers and get inside. They moved carefully, trying not to attract attention. The inside of the bunker was dark and quiet, only the faint hum of the machines breaking the silence. When they entered the main hall, they were met with what they expected. The conspirators were already waiting for them. There were several people in the hall dressed as Suna shinobi, their faces hidden by masks, and their hands clutching weapons. "Well, here you are," came a deep voice belonging to the leader of the conspirators. He stood in the center of the room, holding a device that Naruto realized was the key to activating the Ouroboros project. Naruto and Sasori paused, assessing the situation. Their opponents were outnumbered, but they knew that numbers didn't always decide the outcome of a fight. It all depended on their skill and determination. "You will not stop us," the leader said, his voice full of confidence. "We will see our plan through to the end. The Kazekage will fall, and those who truly know how to rule this village will take his place." "We won't let you destroy Suna," Naruto replied, her voice firm but calm. She knew she had to keep her cool now. Sasori took a step forward, his eyes turning cold as ice. "We will not let you destroy everything we fight for," he said quietly, but there was a threat in his voice. "Your plan will not work. We will stop you." The fight began suddenly, like a flash of lightning. The conspirators rushed at Naruto and Sasori, trying to surround them and deprive them of any chance of resistance. But they did not expect that their opponents would be so skilled and determined. Naruto used her abilities and skills in battle, dancing among the attacks of her enemies. Her movements were fast and precise, each attack finding its mark, and she felt confidence growing inside her. Sasori, on the other hand, controlled his puppets with amazing dexterity. Their movements were synchronized as if one, making him a dangerous opponent. Every moment of the battle seemed to last an eternity. The conspirators fought desperately, knowing that this was their last chance to win. They were experienced shinobi, seasoned in battle, and Naruto felt the tension growing with each passing moment. But she could not afford to be weak. Her duty to the village, her alliance with Sasori, her own life all depended on the outcome of this fight. Sasori, despite his cool demeanor, felt anger boiling inside him. These men had betrayed their village, endangering the lives of thousands for their own ambitions. He could not forgive them for that. His puppets attacked with unprecedented ferocity, striking with precision that would terrify any opponent. As the battle reached its peak, Naruto noticed the leader of the conspirators attempting to activate the device. She instantly knew that this could be the end. If the device was activated, everything they had fought for would be destroyed. She knew that she had to stop him, even if it cost her her life. Gathering all her strength, Naruto charged forward. Her movements were as fast as a hurricane, channeling her chakra to increase the speed and power of her attack. The leader of the conspirators saw her approaching, but he didn't have time to react. Naruto delivered a blow that knocked the device out of his hands. It flew to the side, smashing against the wall. The leader recoiled, his eyes burning with hatred. "You don't understand what you've done, girl," he shouted, trying to strike back. But Naruto was faster. She dodged and counterattacked, disarming him and immobilizing him with her unique fighting style. Sasori, meanwhile, finished the fight with the rest of the conspirators. Their resistance was broken and they could no longer threaten. With the last threat eliminated, Naruto and Sasori stood in the middle of the destroyed hall, breathing heavily. Their bodies were exhausted, but they knew they had won. The conspirators were incapacitated, and the Ouroboros project was stopped. Naruto looked at Sasori, gratitude evident in her eyes. They had been able to do this together. Their alliance, which had started with mistrust and suspicion, had now become something much more. They had realized that they could rely on each other in the most difficult moments. "We did it," Sasori said quietly, his voice hoarse with fatigue, but there was pride in it. Naruto nodded, her face showing relief. "Yes, we did," she replied, feeling the tension gradually fading away, leaving a space for joy. They stood side by side, realizing that their fates were now even more intertwined. This fight had changed them both. They had experienced danger together and were able to overcome it, which had created an unbreakable bond between them. But Naruto knew that there were still greater challenges ahead. Suna had been saved, but the threat was not completely gone. They had to restore order and protect the village from new enemies that could appear at any moment. As they left the bunker, Naruto and Sasori knew that they were now part of something bigger. Their alliance, built on trust and respect, would be the foundation for protecting the world they believed in. And together, they were ready to face whatever challenges fate might bring. Chapter 13, A New Beginning. As dawn began to paint the horizon in soft pinks and golds, Naruto stood on the balcony of the Kazekage's residence and watched as the village of Suna slowly awakened to the new day. Last night, she and Sasori had achieved a victory that would change their lives forever. The conspirators had been defeated, the threat to the village had been eliminated, and now they could breathe a sigh of relief. But Naruto knew that this was only the beginning. After the night's battle, their paths with Sasori could never be the same. Everything they had been through together had changed them forever, and now they had a bond that could not be broken. Their alliance, which had once been forced, was now something much more. It was not simply a collaboration for the sake of a mission, it was based on a deep understanding and trust that had been forged between them in the most difficult moments. The Kazekage, realizing the gravity of the events that had taken place in his village and the contributions Naruto and Sasori had made to saving Suna, summoned them to an audience. He wanted to personally thank them for their bravery and dedication, and to discuss the future of the village and their own future. As Naruto and Sasori entered the hall where the Kazekage awaited them, they felt a new responsibility fall upon their shoulders. They knew that their victory was only the first step to something greater, and now they had to do everything in their power to maintain peace and stability in Suna. The Kazekage greeted them with respect and gratitude, his face, usually cold and impassive, now expressing sincere recognition. "Naruto, Sasori," he began, his voice deep and firm. "You saved our village from destruction. Your actions have proven that you are the true protectors of Suna, and I am proud to have you as part of our village." Naruto felt her heart warm at those words. She had always considered it her duty to protect those she loved, and now she knew that her efforts had not been in vain. "Thank you, Kazekage-sama," she replied respectfully. "But our work is not yet done. We have much work to do to return peace and stability to the village." The Kazekage nodded, agreeing with her. "You're right," he said. "But I'm sure that together we can overcome any difficulties. I'd like to discuss your future with you. After everything you've been through, I think you need to think about how you see your place in Suna." Sasori, standing next to Naruto, listened attentively to the Kazekage's words. It was difficult for him to talk about the future, as he was used to living in the present, dealing with problems as they arose. But now that the conspirators had been defeated, he realized that it was time to think about how he and Naruto could move forward. We both understand that our paths have changed, Sasori began, his voice soft but firm. We began this journey as allies, but now our relationship has become something more. I believe that together we can not only protect our village, but create a future where we can both be happy. The Kazakage looked at them with approval. Your words are true, he said, his eyes glowing with warmth. I bless your union and wish you both happiness and peace. I am confident that you will become a strong couple who can lead our village forward. Naruto felt her eyes fill with tears. They were tears of joy and relief. She knew that she and Sasori could now begin a new beginning, one based on trust, love, and respect. Her heart filled with gratitude for the Kazakage and all those who had supported them along the way. After the audience with the Kazakage, Naruto and Sasori walked out into the streets of Suna, which were already beginning to fill with life. People were going about their business, and everything seemed so peaceful that it was hard to believe that just a few days ago the village was on the brink of destruction. But now all that was left behind. They walked side by side, their hearts beating in unison. Naruto felt a sense of calm and confidence growing within her. She knew that new challenges lay ahead, but now they were ready to face them together. You know, Naruto said quietly, looking at Sasori, I never thought that things would turn out this way. When I came here, I was full of doubts and fear. But now I understand that everything that happened was necessary for us to become who we are now. Sasori looked at her, his eyes full of tenderness. You changed me, Naruto, he admitted, his voice soft. I was always alone, relying only on myself. But now I understand that I can no longer walk this path alone. You taught me to trust and love, and for that I will be grateful to you for the rest of my life. Naruto smiled, her heart filling with warmth. I learned a lot too, she said. I realized that strength lies not only in the ability to fight, but also in the ability to forgive and love. I am grateful to fate for bringing us together. They stopped and Sasori took her hand, their fingers intertwined, the touch so natural, as if they had always been together. We now have a future to build together, Sasori said quietly. And I promise I'll do everything I can to make you happy. Naruto nodded, her eyes shining with tears. And I promise I'll always be there for you, she replied, her voice full of love and determination. We'll get through whatever comes our way. There will be many challenges ahead, but I know we can get through them together. They continued on their way, feeling the unbreakable bond between them grow stronger. Their lives would be different now. They would build their future on the values they had developed together, trust, respect, and love. Their union would be a new beginning for both of them. Peaceful life was gradually restored in the village. With the threat of the conspirators eliminated, the people of Suna began to return to their daily concerns. But they remembered the danger that hung over them and those who saved them from destruction. Naruto and Sasori became symbols of fortitude and determination for all who saw their feat. As time went on, Naruto and Sasori's relationship grew stronger. They worked together to help the village recover from the turmoil. Their partnership was based on a deep understanding and support, and this made their alliance even stronger. The Kazakage, watching their development, felt proud that people like Naruto and Sasori were part of his village. He knew that with them, Suna would be in good hands. Months passed, and Naruto and Sasori decided that it was time to take the next step. They decided to officially tie their lives together by becoming husband and wife. Their decision was met with joy and support from all of Suna. The ceremony was simple, but filled with warmth and sincerity. Everyone who attended felt that this was not just a union of two people, but a symbol of a new beginning for the entire village. After the wedding, Naruto and Sasori continued to work together, but now they were not only fulfilling their duties to the village, but also building their own happiness. They knew that there were still many trials ahead, but now they were more prepared than ever. Their union became an example for many. Naruto and Sasori showed that even the most difficult times can be overcome if there is trust and love. They became symbols of hope and faith in the future, and their story will be passed down from generation to generation, inspiring new shinobi to feats in the name of peace and justice. Time passed, and Suna gradually returned to a peaceful life. But in the heart of each resident lived the memory of those who saved their village from destruction. Naruto and Sasori continued to protect their village, knowing that their new path would be full of challenges. But they were ready to face them together. It was a new beginning, a beginning in which they could not only do their duty, but also be happy. And that was the most important thing. Chapter 14, Bright Future. Months had passed since that decisive battle that changed the fate of the Suna village and forever linked the lives of Naruto and Sasori. Peace had returned to their lives, and although memories of the past still occasionally surfaced, they now looked to the future with confidence and hope. Their union, which began as a political move, became a symbol of peace and harmony between Konoha and Suna. It was an example of how two people from different worlds could find common ground and become an inseparable part of each other. Their story became a legend, which was told with respect in both villages. Now Naruto and Sasori were not just heroes, but also a symbol of how love and trust can overcome any obstacles. Life in Suna was gradually getting back to normal. People began to rebuild their destroyed houses, rebuild the streets and squares, and return to their normal activities. The atmosphere in the village was as calm as before, but now there was a feeling of gratitude and respect for those who had protected them in their time of need. Naruto and Sasori decided to use their influence and experience to further strengthen the relationship between Konoha and Suna. They met frequently with the leaders of both villages, discussing opportunities for cooperation and sharing experiences. Their efforts bore fruit, with the villages establishing strong bonds of trust and understanding. One of the first steps towards this was the exchange of embassies. Suna's finest were sent to Konoha to better understand the Leaf Village's culture and traditions, while Konoha's shinobi came to Suna to establish ties and promote peace. These exchanges led to new alliances and friendships, which ultimately contributed to overall peace and stability. Naruto and Sasori took an active part in this process. They traveled between villages, meeting with young shinobi, sharing their experiences, and talking about the importance of maintaining peace and harmony. Their example inspired the new generation, showing that even the greatest obstacles can be overcome if there is a goal and determination. However, despite all their duties and work for the benefit of the villages, Naruto and Sasori did not forget about their personal lives. Their union grew stronger every day, and they began to build their new life together. They arranged their home in Suna, turning it into a cozy and warm place, where an atmosphere of love and understanding always reigned. Naruto learned to take care of herself and her loved ones, and Sasori, who was once a loner, became a true partner, ready to support and protect his wife in any situation. They enjoyed every moment spent together, whether it was quiet evenings at home or training together at the training ground. The past was still a part of their lives, but it no longer weighed them down. Instead, they used their experiences and lessons learned in the past to become better and stronger. They understood that without the trials they had gone through, their union would not have been as strong and deep. One day, as the sun was beginning to set, Naruto and Sasori decided to go for a walk through the desert surrounding Suna. This place that Naruto had once found foreign and dangerous had now become her home. She had learned to love this land, its harsh beauty and scorching winds. But most of all, she loved these moments when she and Sasori could simply be together, enjoying the peace and quiet. They walked side by side, holding each other's hands, feeling an invisible connection flowing between them that grew stronger with each passing day. "Did you ever think that things would turn out like this?" Naruto asked. Her voice was quiet, but there was joy in it. Sasori thought for a moment, his gaze directed into the distance, to the endless expanses of the desert. "If someone had told me that I would find my happiness in such a union, I would not have believed it," he admitted, his voice soft. "But now I understand that it was inevitable. Everything we have been through has led us to this moment, and I do not regret anything." Naruto smiled, her heart filling with warmth. "I don't regret it either," she said, her voice full of love. "You changed my life, Sasori. You taught me to see the world differently, and I'm grateful to you for that." Sasori looked at her, and tears glistened in his eyes. They were tears of joy and gratitude. "You changed me, Naruto," he said quietly, squeezing her hand. "You showed me that love can overcome anything. And now I know that with you, I can overcome any obstacle." They stopped and Sasori kissed her forehead gently. It was a moment of complete harmony, when everything in their lives seemed right and in its place. The sun was slowly sinking below the horizon, painting the desert in bright orange and gold hues. It was a symbol of a new day, a new beginning that lay ahead. When they returned to the village, they were greeted by the joyful faces of the villagers. For them all, Naruto and Sasori were a symbol of hope and strength. Their union was an example of how even in the most difficult situations, a path to a brighter future can be found. As time passed, life in Suna continued. Naruto and Sasori became important figures in the political and social life of the village. They assisted the Kazekage in making important decisions, participated in peace negotiations with other villages, and did their best to maintain peace and prosperity in their home village. But despite all their responsibilities, they never forgot that the most important thing in their lives was each other's love and support. They continued to build their future together, knowing that their journey was not yet over and that there were still many amazing and joyful moments ahead. One evening, as they sat on the veranda of their home, enjoying the warm breeze, Naruto looked at Sasori and quietly said, "I think we have a great future. No matter what lies ahead, I know we can get through it together." Sasori smiled and hugged her, feeling gratitude growing inside him for every moment he spent with Naruto. "I believe it too," he said, his voice full of confidence. "We've been through a lot, and now I know that with you, I'm ready to face any challenge. Our future will be bright because we're building it together." They sat in silence, enjoying the moment, and felt an unbreakable bond flowing between them. It was a bond based on trust, love, and respect, the values that they had carried through all the trials and which now became the foundation of their bright future. And although their path was full of difficulties, they knew that together they could overcome any obstacles. Their love was the light that led them forward, and with this light they could boldly look to the future, knowing that everything would be fine.